Every ancient ruin was once part of a living world. People walked through those corridors, carried water through those streets, lit fires inside those chambers, and built walls believing they would protect something important. But over time, the people disappeared while the structures remained. Today, archaeologists often arrive at these places with advanced technology, satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, and chemical analysis. Yet many sites still refuse to give complete answers. Some discoveries rewrite timelines. Others reveal technologies or construction choices that seem unexpectedly advanced for their era. And sometimes, the greatest mystery is how an entire civilization could leave behind enormous monuments while leaving so little explanation of itself. The ancient world is not just buried under earth and stone, it is buried beneath thousands of years of missing context. In the tropical lowlands of Veracruz, Mexico, El Tajin rose from the jungle like a machine designed to measure time itself. Long before the Aztec Empire reached power, this city was already covered in pyramids, ceremonial courts, drainage tunnels, and stone structures engineered with a level of precision that still confuses archaeologists today. At the center of it all stood a pyramid containing exactly 365 recessed niches, a numerical design so deliberate that many researchers believe El Tajin was not simply a city, but a gigantic architectural calendar built in stone. Although local Totonac communities never completely forgot the ruins, El Tajin remained largely hidden beneath dense vegetation for centuries after its collapse around the 13th century. The site gained international attention in the late 18th century when Spanish official Diego Ruiz accidentally encountered the Pyramid of the Niches while searching for illegal tobacco plantations in the jungle. What he found was shocking. Massive ceremonial platforms emerged from the forest floor. Staircases climbed through collapsing temples, and relief carvings covered abandoned ball courts. But the structure that immediately drew attention was the strange pyramid filled with hundreds of perfectly arranged niches. Modern excavations throughout the 20th and 21st centuries reveal that El Tajin once covered nearly 10 square kilometers and may have supported a population exceeding 20,000 inhabitants during its peak between 600 and 1200 CE. Yet unlike famous Maya cities such as Chichen Itza or Tikal, El Tajin left behind no large readable written records explaining how its builders achieved their engineering feats. That silence remains one of the city's greatest mysteries. The Pyramid of the Niches is not enormous by Egyptian standards. Rising only about 20 meters high, it appears modest compared to monuments such as the Great Pyramid of Giza. But what makes this structure extraordinary is not its scale. It is the mathematical intention hidden inside its design. The pyramid contains exactly 365 niches distributed across its terraces, immediately connecting the monument to the solar calendar. Yet the deeper archaeologists studied the structure, the stranger it became. The niches are not random decorative recesses carved into stone. Each one creates controlled shadow patterns throughout the day. As sunlight moves across the pyramid, sections alternate between deep darkness and extreme brightness, almost like a giant optical mechanism reacting to the movement of the sun itself. Some archaeoastronomers believe the structure functioned as a ceremonial timekeeping device, while others argue it encoded agricultural cycles tied to Veracruz's seasonal rainfall patterns. But no explanation fully accounts for the precision involved. The mystery becomes even more disturbing when considering the technological limitations of the civilization that built it. The people of El Tajin possessed no iron tools, no wheeled transport systems for heavy construction, and no surviving mathematical manuscripts comparable to later astronomical codices. Yet the pyramid maintains remarkably consistent proportions across multiple terrace levels with surprisingly low deviation. Researchers comparing the monument to ancient observatories often reference the solar alignments of Chichen Itza, the calendrical symbolism of Teotihuacan, and even the precision planning visible at Machu Picchu. But El Tajin differs in one critical way. Most ancient ceremonial structures express astronomical symbolism through orientation or seasonal shadow effects alone. The Pyramid of the Niches appears to embed numerical encoding directly into the architecture itself. The monument behaves less like a temple and more like a physical computation system built entirely from stone. Even more puzzling is the psychological effect created by the niches. Their deep recesses absorb sunlight differently during various times of day, producing intense contrast patterns visible from large distances. Some researchers believe the builders intentionally manipulated light perception to create ritual experiences during ceremonies, turning the pyramid into a form of controlled visual theatre. To this day, no one fully understands how the builders calculated the niche distribution, maintained proportional symmetry, or engineered such optical precision without advanced surveying technology. One of the least discussed yet most advanced aspects of El Tajin lies underground. Veracruz receives enormous rainfall, often exceeding 1,500 millimeters annually, and tropical storms combined with erosion should have destroyed much of the city centuries ago. Yet major structures remain standing after nearly 1,000 years. Excavations revealed a surprisingly sophisticated hydraulic system, consisting of underground drainage channels, sloped stone platforms, water diversion tunnels, and retaining systems specifically designed to prevent structural collapse. In several locations, archaeologists discovered carefully angled stonework beneath plazas, apparently engineered to redirect rainwater pressure away from foundations. Some of these channels still partially function during storms today. This is particularly important because many buildings at El Tajin were not solid stone monuments. Their cores frequently contained compacted earth and rubble fill, materials extremely vulnerable to moisture damage. Without effective water management, the city should have deteriorated rapidly in the humid, tropical environment. Instead, it survived for centuries in one of the harshest construction climates in Mesoamerica. Civil engineers studying the site have even compared certain drainage principles to later colonial Spanish systems, despite El Tajin predating them by several hundred years. The unanswered question remains deeply unsettling. How did the builders understand long-term erosion control with such precision without modern hydrological science? Several researchers investigating El Tajin noticed another anomaly that sounds almost impossible. Certain plazas and stairways produce highly unusual acoustic reflections. A simple hand clap near specific structures generates echoes resembling bird calls, especially tones associated with the Quetzal bird, an animal deeply connected to Mesoamerican spirituality. Acoustic engineers studying the phenomenon believe these effects may not be accidental. The geometry of terraces, staircases, and ceremonial plazas could have been intentionally designed to manipulate sound during rituals and public gatherings. If true, El Tajin would represent one of the earliest known examples of large-scale acoustic engineering in the Americas. The theory becomes even more unsettling when combined with the city's ritual architecture. The strongest sound anomalies occur near ceremonial centers and ball courts, precisely the places associated with sacrifice, political authority, and religious performance. In other words, the city may have been engineered not only to impress visually, but psychologically. The builders of El Tajin may have understood how architecture could influence human perception long before formal acoustic science existed. El Tajin contains at least 17 ceremonial ball courts, one of the highest concentrations ever discovered in Mesoamerica. That number alone suggests the ritual ball game played a role far beyond entertainment. The South Ball Court contains elaborate relief carvings showing sacrifice scenes, skeletal imagery, and ritual figures interacting with supernatural beings. Some panels appear to depict decapitation rituals connected to cosmological beliefs about rebirth and celestial cycles. But several carvings remain difficult to interpret because their iconography does not fully match either Maya or Aztec traditions. This has led some archaeologists to believe El Tajin represented a unique cultural and intellectual center whose religious system evolved independently from neighboring civilizations. The city almost feels technologically isolated, as if its builders developed specialized systems of knowledge that disappeared with them. The unusually high number of ball courts may indicate that ritual competition, astronomy, politics, and sacrifice were integrated into a single ceremonial framework unlike anything else in ancient Mesoamerica. Around the early 13th century, El Tajin declined rapidly. Yet archaeologists have found no definitive evidence of catastrophic invasion, no massive burn layers suggesting complete destruction, and no confirmed epidemic large enough to erase the population entirely. Instead, the city appears to have been gradually abandoned. That creates one final mystery. How does a civilization capable of constructing advanced hydraulic systems, astronomical architecture, engineered acoustics, and large ceremonial complexes simply disappear without leaving clear historical records explaining its collapse? What do you think really happened to El Tajin? Was it abandoned because of environmental collapse, political conflict, or did an entire system of ancient knowledge simply disappear with its people? Share your theory in the comments below. Near the ancient crossroads of Sogdiana and Bactria in Central Asia, Mug Tepe Fort rises from the earth like the remains of a civilization that understood materials science far beyond what historians expected. Built largely from mud brick and compacted earth, the fortress should have vanished centuries ago beneath wind erosion, salt storms, freezing winters, and brutal summer heat. Instead, parts of its walls still stand, and modern engineers still struggle to explain why. Mug Tepe was identified through archaeological surveys across ancient settlement zones of Uzbekistan and nearby Silk Road regions during 20th century excavations focused on early urban fortifications. Initial digs revealed defensive walls, layered construction phases, storage structures, and unusually durable earthen architecture. What appeared at first to be a typical Central Asian mud fortress slowly became something far more puzzling. Researchers discovered that many wall segments retained structural cohesion despite being exposed for centuries. Some outer surfaces had hardened into crust-like shells resistant to rain and desert abrasion. The more archaeologists uncovered, the stranger the engineering became. This is the greatest mystery surrounding Mug Tepe. Mudbrick architecture is not supposed to survive this long. Modern experiments show that untreated mudbrick exposed to repeated cycles of rain, wind abrasion, and thermal stress rapidly deteriorates. In arid continental climates like Central Asia, structures face some of the harshest environmental fluctuations on Earth. Temperatures in parts of Uzbekistan can range from below -15 degrees Celsius in winter to above 40 degrees Celsius in summer, creating expansion and contraction forces that crack most earthen materials over time. Yet sections of Mug Tepe endured for centuries. Archaeologists studying ancient Central Asian fortresses noticed that some surfaces at Mug Tepe appear unusually compact and chemically stabilized. Instead of crumbling evenly, the walls developed hardened outer layers that function almost like protective shells. Some researchers compared the effect to natural geopolymerization, a process where minerals bond into stone-like compounds over time. The mystery is that modern reconstruction attempts often fail to reproduce the same durability. Experimental mud brick walls exposed to simulated desert conditions tend to erode significantly faster than surviving ancient structures. Even when researchers copy the same clay composition, the same sand ratios and similar drying conditions, the results rarely match the resilience of original ancient walls. This raises disturbing possibilities. The builders may have used organic stabilizers, plant fibers, animal proteins, mineral salts, ash compounds, or multi-stage drying techniques now lost to history. Some engineers believe ancient builders understood moisture migration far better than previously assumed. Tiny differences in pore structure inside compacted earth can drastically change how water evaporates and how salt crystals form. If controlled correctly, the walls become far more resistant to cracking and erosion. At Mug Tepe, erosion itself may have become part of the design. The fortress walls appear shaped to reduce direct wind shear. Rounded corners and sloped surfaces distribute sand abrasion instead of concentrating it in weak points. Similar principles are used today in aerospace engineering and desert architecture. What makes the mystery even deeper is comparison. Many modern concrete buildings in harsh climates begin serious degradation after only 50 to 100 years, yet some ancient earthen fortifications in Central Asia have survived nearly 2 millennia. Sites such as Argi Bam and Merv display similar unexplained resilience. Mug Tepe belongs to the same category of ancient structures that seem technologically too durable for the materials they were built from. For some material scientists, this is no longer just archaeology. It is a lost engineering problem. At first glance, Mug Tepe looks primitive compared to Roman stone fortresses, but its defensive logic tells another story. Excavations revealed layered defensive walls, narrow movement corridors, angled entry approaches, elevated observation zones, and overlapping lines of visibility. These are not random features. Military historians note that such layouts create controlled movement paths that slow invading forces while exposing them to defenders from multiple directions. Some corridors appear intentionally compressed to prevent large groups from advancing simultaneously. This resembles later siege defense concepts seen in medieval castles and Roman military engineering, yet Mug Tepe predates many of these systems. The fortress demonstrates an understanding of crowd movement, line of sight control, defensive geometry, and kinetic bottleneck. For a structure made largely of earth, the tactical sophistication is remarkable. Another mystery lies inside the fortress itself. Massive earthen walls possess extremely high thermal inertia. During the day, thick walls absorb heat slowly, and at night they release that heat gradually. This creates interior temperatures far more stable than the outside desert climate. But Mug Tepe may have gone further. Some surviving layouts suggest intentional airflow management through narrow ventilation gaps, pressure-guided corridors, internal cooling channels, and strategic orientation toward prevailing winds. Modern sustainable architects use similar passive cooling systems to reduce energy consumption in desert environments. Yet the builders of Mug Tepe achieved comparable effects without modern thermodynamics. Researchers comparing Central Asian fortresses with ancient Persian windcatcher systems discovered similarities in airflow manipulation. Certain structures appear positioned not merely for defense, but also for environmental regulation. In other words, the fortress may have functioned like a giant climate control machine built entirely from Earth. One of the most technically puzzling discoveries at Mug Tepe involves repair phases. Normally, when ancient walls are rebuilt repeatedly across centuries, weak bonding forms between old and new layers. Cracks spread along structural boundaries and eventually destabilize the entire system. But many repaired sections at Mug Tepe remained remarkably stable. archaeologists found evidence of carefully interlocked material layers, matching shrinkage behavior, controlled density transitions, and compatible moisture absorption between repair phases. This suggests the builders understood long-term structural behavior at a surprisingly advanced level. Even modern restoration teams struggle with these same problems when repairing historical earthen architecture. The ancient engineers of Mug Tepe somehow solved them without mathematical modelling, industrial chemistry, or modern structural analysis. Mug Tepe existed in a region shaped by cultural collision. Persian influence, steppe warfare traditions, Silk Road exchange networks, and Hellenistic engineering ideas all moved through Central Asia across centuries. Technology spread with merchants, soldiers, and migrants. That may explain why Mug Tepe feels strangely advanced for its era. The fortress does not belong entirely to one civilization. Instead, it appears to contain fragments of multiple engineering traditions merged into a single survival system adapted for extreme environments. This may be why archaeologists find the site so difficult to classify. It was not merely a fortress. It may have been an experimental frontier of ancient environmental engineering. Do you think the builders of Mug Tepe possess construction knowledge that modern civilization has partially lost over time? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Built into the Rocky Mountains near Fuzuabad in southern Iran, a fortress constructed nearly 18 centuries ago still holds together with materials modern engineers struggle to fully explain. Qaleh Dokhtar was built around 209 AD by Ardashir before he founded the Sassanid Empire, yet many of its engineering solutions appear centuries ahead of their time. Massive domes survive in an earthquake zone. Precision brickwork remains aligned after almost 2,000 years, and the mortar binding the structure together has endured heat, erosion, and seismic stress, with a durability that continues to puzzle researchers today. Although local communities had known the fortress for centuries, serious archaeological attention began during the 19th and early 20th centuries when European explorers and Persian historians documented the ruins in detail. Later excavations revealed sophisticated vaulted halls, advanced load-bearing systems, and unusually resilient construction materials. Researchers quickly realized Qaleh Dokhtar was not simply a military fortress, but one of the earliest fully developed examples of monumental Sassanid engineering, possibly serving as a prototype for architectural systems that would later influence Byzantine and Islamic architecture across the Middle East. The most shocking aspect of Qaleh Dokhtar is the scale and maturity of its dome construction. In architectural history, large masonry domes usually evolve gradually over centuries through repeated experimentation. Roman builders refined their domes through generations of engineering experience, culminating in structures like the Pantheon in Rome, whose concrete dome spans more than 43 meters. Yet at Qaleh Dokhtar, the Sassanids appeared to leap directly into highly advanced dome engineering almost at the beginning of their empire. Several chambers inside the fortress feature vaults and domes reaching heights estimated between 14 and 16 meters, relying on carefully angled baked bricks and gypsum mortar to distribute compressive force evenly through the walls. Modern structural simulations suggest that even slight errors in brick alignment could destabilize the entire system, yet many sections remain standing after approximately 1800 years. What makes this even more mysterious is the environment itself. The fortress stands in a seismically active region where earthquakes repeatedly strike southern Iran, while temperatures fluctuate dramatically between scorching daytime heat and cold desert nights. Under such conditions, masonry structures typically crack and weaken over time, yet portions of Qaleh Dokhtar still preserve their geometric integrity with remarkable precision. Some historians argue the Sassanids inherited architectural knowledge from Parthian traditions, while others believe the techniques evolved from a Mesopotamian vault systems. However, no surviving intermediate examples fully explain how such sophisticated dome engineering appeared so suddenly and at such scale. One of the fortress's most important innovations is the early use of the squinch, a transitional architectural device allowing a circular dome to rest on top of a square room. Today this may sound simple, but in ancient engineering it represented a major geometric challenge because the weight of a dome naturally concentrates unevenly at the corners of a square chamber, creating dangerous stress fractures. The squinch redistributes this force gradually, transforming a square base into an octagonal or circular support system capable of carrying enormous loads more safely. At Qaleh Dokhtar, this technology appears astonishingly refined for the early 3rd century AD. Similar systems later became fundamental to Islamic architecture, influencing mosques, palaces, and monumental domes across Persia, Central Asia, and eventually the Ottoman Empire. Byzantine architects also employed related techniques centuries later. The mystery is not merely that the squinch existed, but how technically mature it already was. Archaeologists have found very few earlier prototypes showing a slow developmental process, making it appear as though the engineers behind Qaleh Dokhtar already possessed a fully formed understanding of advanced geometric load transfer long before such concepts became widespread elsewhere. Among all the mysteries surrounding Qaleh Dokhtar, the most scientifically intriguing may be the mortar itself. At first glance, the fortress appears to use ordinary ancient masonry techniques, but laboratory analysis of surviving mortar samples has revealed a far more complex material composition than researchers initially expected. Scientists identified combinations of gypsum plaster, mineral ash, silicate compounds, and microscopic organic inclusions that may have strengthened the mixture over time and increased its resistance to structural failure. What makes this extraordinary is the mortar's ability to survive environmental destruction over nearly 18 centuries. The fortress has endured repeated seismic activity, thermal expansion caused by desert temperature fluctuations, seasonal moisture exposure, and continuous wind erosion, yet many joints between bricks remain remarkably stable. Modern engineers often compare this phenomenon to other ancient material mysteries, such as Roman marine concrete, which becomes stronger through chemical interaction with seawater, or Nabatean hydraulic mortar used at Petra. In several areas of Qaleh Dokhtar, the mortar appears to resist cracking better than expected for standard gypsum-based compounds, suggesting the builders may have understood material behavior far more deeply than traditionally assumed. Some material scientists suspect the builders intentionally mixed volcanic ash or reactive silicates into the mortar, creating early forms of pozzolanic behavior similar to Roman cement technology. Others believe organic additives, possibly plant fibers, ash derivatives, or animal-based compounds, enhanced flexibility and prevented catastrophic fracturing during earthquakes. What remains unresolved is whether the Sassanids discovered these properties experimentally through generations of testing or inherited a much older tradition of chemical construction knowledge now largely lost to history. The implications are enormous, because if the mortar technology at Qaleh Dokhtar was intentionally engineered for seismic durability, then ancient Persian builders possessed a level of practical material science far beyond what is traditionally associated with the early 3rd century. The location of Qaleh Dokhtar raises another major engineering mystery. The fortress sits high on steep rocky terrain overlooking the approach to Fuzuabad, making the transportation of construction materials enormously difficult in the 3rd century AD. Builders would have needed millions of baked bricks, large volumes of water, timber scaffolding, stone foundation material, and constant food supplies for labourers, all while Ardashir was conducting military campaigns against the Parthian Empire. Some archaeologists estimate construction progressed unusually quickly, possibly within only a few years. If true, the logistics alone imply an exceptionally organised labour and transportation system capable of operating at a scale far beyond what many historians previously assumed for the early Sassanid state. Even more surprising is the standardization of the brickwork itself. Many surviving bricks display highly consistent dimensions and firing quality, suggesting controlled large-scale production rather than irregular local crafting. This level of uniformity resembles proto-industrial organization centuries before similar systems became common in many parts of the world. The more researchers examine the fortress, the more it appears less like an isolated stronghold and more like the product of a civilization already operating with advanced administrative and engineering coordination. Another poorly understood feature of Qaleh Dokhtar is its internal airflow design. The fortress contains narrow corridors, elevated chambers, and strategically positioned openings that appear to regulate ventilation naturally throughout the structure. Some interior rooms remain noticeably cooler than surrounding exterior areas, even under intense desert heat, leading researchers to suspect the builders intentionally engineered airflow dynamics into the fortress itself. Several studies suggest the structure may have exploited pressure differentials and controlled air circulation to stabilize indoor temperatures. Similar passive cooling principles would later appear in Persian windcatchers and Middle Eastern climate-adaptive architecture, but Qaleh Dokhtar may represent one of the earliest monumental examples of such environmental engineering. If intentional, this would mean the fortress was not merely defensive architecture, but a carefully designed structure capable of manipulating thermal conditions using principles of airflow and pressure nearly 2,000 years before modern climate-responsive design became widely studied. What do you think ancient builders at Qaleh Dokhtar truly understood about engineering and materials nearly 18 centuries ago? Were these technologies independently discovered or remnants of an older lost tradition? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Doclea sits in a seismic river basin in the Balkans, surrounded by unstable terrain, flood-prone waterways, and fractured limestone ground. Yet for nearly 2,000 years, parts of its streets, foundations, drainage tunnels, and stone structures resisted collapse with a level of precision that still confuses archaeologists and engineers today. The ruins of Doclea were identified near modern Podgorica during the 19th century, but major excavations accelerated in the late 1800s under archaeologist Pavel Ravinsky and later Balkan and Yugoslav research teams. What initially appeared to be a standard Roman provincial city quickly became stranger as excavation revealed unusually advanced infrastructure hidden beneath the visible ruins. Researchers uncovered paved streets, thermal baths, temples, villas, drainage systems, and massive stone architecture spread across nearly 25 hectares. But unlike many Roman cities built on relatively stable plains, Doclea had been constructed in one of the worst possible geological environments for long-term urban survival. That was the first mystery. Doclea was constructed between the Maraca and Zeta river systems, in a region historically affected by flooding, soil shifting, and earthquakes. Modern seismic maps of Montenegro show that the Balkans remain one of the more tectonically active zones in southern Europe, with earthquakes above magnitude 6 repeatedly striking the wider region throughout recorded history. Most ancient civilizations avoided placing dense urban centers directly on unstable alluvial terrain, because long-term damage to roads, foundations, and water systems became nearly impossible to control. Yet the Romans at Doclea did the opposite. excavations revealed multi-layered road foundations beneath the stone streets, including compacted gravel beds, crushed stone, drainage layers, and pressure distribution fill designed to reduce movement from water and shifting soil. In some areas, the underground support structure was thicker than the visible road itself. Modern engineers comparing Roman road construction across Europe found that the foundational layering at Doclea appears unusually adapted for seismic flexibility rather than simple load-bearing. Certain segments show evidence of partial movement absorption, similar in principle to primitive anti-vibration engineering. This becomes even more remarkable when compared to cities like Pompeii, where volcanic destruction preserved buildings, but also revealed how vulnerable many Roman urban structures were to ground instability. Doclea, by contrast, appears to have been engineered specifically to survive unstable terrain. The most debated mystery at Doclea involves its stone construction. Several surviving structures, particularly around temple complexes and civic areas, contain limestone blocks fitted with an extremely low margin of error. Even after centuries of earthquakes, weathering, and structural collapse, some joints remain astonishingly tight. This should not have happened. The limestone used around Doclea is relatively brittle compared to harder stones like granite or basalt, and precise cutting normally increases the risk of cracking during shaping and transport. Yet, archaeologists found numerous blocks aligned with such precision that blade insertion between joints becomes difficult even today. What makes this even stranger is the regional context. The Balkans were never considered a major centre of ultra-precision stone masonry comparable to ancient Egypt, the Inca world, or certain Hellenistic megastructures. But parts of Doclea display fitting tolerances unexpectedly close to those traditions. Some researchers compared the masonry to sections of Sacsay-Waman, where enormous stones interlock with almost no mortar, while others noted similarities to Roman imperial engineering projects like Baalbek, though on a smaller scale. The unanswered question is not simply how the stones were cut, but how they were repeatedly standardized. Roman iron tools certainly existed, but achieving consistent low-error fitting across large architectural sections would have required highly controlled shaping methods, accurate measuring systems, and advanced understanding of stress distribution. Some theories suggest abrasive slurry cutting techniques using quartz sand and water may have been employed more extensively than previously believed, while others speculate controlled heating and cooling may have softened or weakened stone surfaces during shaping. No definitive explanation exists. Even more puzzling is the long-term survival of the joints themselves. Mortar degradation normally destabilizes ancient masonry over centuries, yet some fitted sections at Doclea remain structurally coherent despite severe environmental exposure. This suggests the precision itself may have reduced dependence on binding material. In other words, the engineering strength came from geometry rather than cement, a concept that feels surprisingly modern. Another major mystery lies underground. Doclea's drainage and sewage systems were constructed with extremely accurate gradients to maintain water flow through uneven terrain, and several underground channels remain partially functional after nearly 2 millennia. The precision required for this is difficult to overstate. A drainage error of only a few degrees across long distances could cause stagnation, overflow, or structural erosion, yet many channels at Doclea maintain stable inclines despite centuries of earthquakes and land movement. Researchers studying Roman hydraulic systems often compare these structures to aqueduct engineering elsewhere in the empire. For example, sections of the Pont du Gard aqueduct maintain a gradient averaging roughly 34 centimeters per kilometer. That level of precision is already astonishing, yet Doclea achieved similar hydraulic control on unstable ground. Without laser surveying equipment, computerized modeling, or modern geological analysis, Roman engineers somehow calculated terrain behavior with extraordinary accuracy. Some archaeologists believe they possessed far more sophisticated field surveying techniques than historical reconstructions currently assume. Roman cities were famous for organized street grids, but Doclea presents an unusual problem. The terrain around the city is uneven, fractured, and geologically inconsistent, meaning that maintaining a near-symmetrical urban layout under those conditions would have required constant recalibration during construction. Yet the main streets of Doclea remained remarkably aligned. Even more interesting, certain sections show evidence of reconstruction after seismic damage without destroying the original urban geometry. This suggests the city may have been repeatedly adjusted while preserving its original engineering logic. Some modern researchers compare this adaptability to later earthquake-resistant planning concepts found in parts of East Asia centuries afterward. The implication is uncomfortable because it suggests Roman provincial engineers may have understood long-term geological behavior better than historians once believed. Excavations at Doclea also uncovered Roman hypocaust systems beneath bath complexes. Hypocaust were underfloor heating systems using hot air circulation, but the Doclea versions appear unusually optimized for colder Balkan conditions. The subfloor chambers and heat channels were denser than standard Mediterranean examples, and certain sections appear specifically designed to reduce heat loss and maintain longer thermal retention during winter. Modern thermal simulations of Roman bath engineering show that properly insulated hypocaust systems could maintain internal temperatures exceeding 40 degrees Celsius, while external temperatures dropped dramatically. At Doclea, the efficiency seems unusually high for its era. This raises another question. Were Roman engineers adapting thermal architecture regionally with more sophistication than previously assumed? If so, many surviving Roman sites may represent not standardized imperial construction, but locally optimized engineering systems tailored to climate, geology, and environmental risk. Was Doclea simply an overlooked Roman city, or evidence that ancient engineers understood geology and precision construction far better than we realize today? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The modern village of Rupita in southwestern Bulgaria sits above one of the most overlooked ancient engineering mysteries in Europe. For decades, farmers uncovered fragments of marble, broken inscriptions, and unusually straight stone blocks scattered beneath the soil, but Heraclea Sintica remained largely ignored until systematic excavations intensified in the early 21st century. What archaeologists first believed was a modest provincial settlement quickly revealed something far stranger. Beneath layers of mud deposited by repeated floods from the Struma River lay an entire city engineered with a level of structural planning rarely associated with the ancient Balkans. Each excavation season exposed something new. One year uncovered Roman streets preserved beneath sediment nearly 2 meters deep. Another revealed drainage channels cut with gradients so precise that water could still flow through parts of the system after nearly 2,000 years underground. Then came the discovery that changed how researchers viewed the site entirely, evidence that the city had repeatedly rebuilt itself after catastrophic earthquakes. Unlike Pompeii, which was frozen by a single disaster, Heraclea Sintica appears to have survived multiple destructive events over centuries. The city was not simply destroyed, it adapted. One of the biggest mysteries surrounding Heraclea Sintica is its location. The city sat in a tectonically unstable region near active geological fault systems connected to the Struma Valley. Modern seismic studies show the area has experienced powerful earthquakes for thousands of years. Ancient historians even describe devastating tremors in the wider Macedonian and Thracian regions during Roman times. Yet Heraclea Sintica endured for centuries. Archaeologists discovered that several buildings were constructed using layered foundation systems instead of resting directly on rigid stone bases. Beneath parts of the streets were alternating layers of compacted gravel, sand, clay, and broken stone. This resembles primitive seismic absorption engineering, a concept surprisingly similar to anti-earthquake techniques later seen in Machu Picchu and certain Japanese castle foundations. Some walls at the site were found displaced but not collapsed. Instead of shattering under seismic pressure, portions of the structures appear to have flexed slightly and redistributed force through interconnected masonry joints. The precision is difficult to explain because the region was never considered a major center of advanced engineering comparable to Alexandria or Rome. Researchers still debate whether these techniques were intentional or discovered through centuries of rebuilding after repeated disasters. But the pattern is impossible to ignore. Heraclea Sintica behaved less like a static city and more like a settlement evolving through geological survival. As excavations expanded, archaeologists began uncovering one of the most sophisticated hidden features of the city: its underground hydraulic network. At first, the channels appeared to be ordinary Roman drains, but deeper analysis revealed carefully calculated inclines, interconnected runoff systems, and pressure management sections built with unusually tight stone fitting. Some tunnels maintained consistent gradients over long distances, with the deviations measured in only a few millimeters. This matters because Heraclea Sintica existed in an area vulnerable not only to earthquakes, but also to sudden flooding. Geological surveys indicate the nearby river changed course multiple times over the centuries, depositing heavy sediment across the valley floor. Most cities exposed to that level of instability eventually failed. Heraclea Sintica did not simply remove water, it appears to have controlled it. Certain channels were positioned beneath major structures in ways suggesting they may have reduced hydrostatic pressure under the foundations. In modern engineering, uncontrolled groundwater pressure is one of the leading causes of structural destabilization during seismic events. Somehow, ancient builders here may have partially solved that problem using gravity-fed underground circulation systems. The mystery deepened when excavators found sections of drainage infrastructure still intact despite centuries of erosion, earthquakes, and burial. Roman concrete often survives because of volcanic ash mixtures, but Heraclea Sintica lacked access to the same materials used around the Bay of Naples. Yet portions of its hydraulic systems endured with remarkable stability. Compared to many Roman provincial cities, the engineering here appears disproportionately advanced. The deeper archaeologists dug, the harder it became to explain the city's construction quality. Large stone blocks recovered from administrative and ceremonial structures showed highly standardized dimensions and unusually flat contact surfaces. In several sections, gaps between adjoining stones were so narrow that even modern measuring tools struggled to detect significant irregularities. This level of accuracy creates a major historical problem. Heraclea Sintica was not a wealthy imperial capital, it was a frontier city on the edge of major empires. Yet some of its masonry rivals construction precision found in far more famous ancient sites. Researchers found evidence of carefully cut drainage slots, symmetrical street alignment, standardized load-bearing stone sizes, and coordinated urban planning extending across multiple rebuilding phases. Transporting the stone alone would have been a massive logistical challenge. Some blocks weighed several tons and had to be moved across unstable terrain vulnerable to flooding and landslides. No detailed records survive describing the tools or methods used by the builders. This has led some archaeologists to suspect that specialized engineering groups may have traveled between Macedonian and Roman territories, sharing standardized construction knowledge. Others argue the city gradually accumulated technical expertise over generations because survival in that region demanded it. Either explanation raises difficult questions about how much ancient engineering knowledge has been lost. Every major excavation season at Heraclea Sintica has altered the understanding of the city. Early excavations focused mainly on inscriptions proving the city's identity. Later digs uncovered public buildings, roads, workshops, and evidence of extensive trade. Then archaeologists began finding repeated destruction layers: ash, fractured walls, flood deposits, and collapsed sections buried beneath reconstructed streets. The pattern suggested a cycle of disaster, rebuilding, and adaptation. One excavation revealed that an older street system had been intentionally buried and replaced with a redesigned layout at a higher elevation. Another uncovered reinforced retaining structures likely built to redirect runoff from seasonal flooding. Then came one of the most disturbing discoveries: signs that parts of the city were abandoned while other sectors continued functioning. Instead of collapsing all at once, Heraclea Sintica appears to have slowly fragmented under environmental pressure. This gradual disappearance makes the city fundamentally different from sites like Pompeii or Herculaneum. There was no single apocalyptic ending. The city was erased piece by geology itself. Over centuries, floods covered entire districts beneath sediment. Earthquakes destabilized structures. River shifts altered the landscape. Eventually, the city disappeared so completely that even its memory faded from most historical records. Do you think the builders of Heraclea Sintica truly understood earthquake-resistant engineering centuries ahead of their time? Or were these survival techniques discovered through repeated disasters over generations? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Takht-e Sangin is one of the strangest archaeological sites ever discovered in Central Asia. Built near the meeting point of the Vashj and Panj rivers in modern-day Tajikistan, the ruins appear at first glance to be just another forgotten Hellenistic fortress left behind after the campaigns of Alexander the Great. But beneath the collapsed walls lies evidence of engineering, metallurgy, and craftsmanship so advanced that many archaeologists still struggle to explain how such a remote frontier settlement achieved it more than 2,000 years ago. The site was first seriously investigated during Soviet archaeological expeditions in the 1970s and 1980s. Excavations revealed massive fortified walls, temple complexes, workshops, weapons caches, and thousands of artifacts buried beneath layers of mud brick claps. What shocked researchers was not only the scale of the discoveries, but the technological sophistication hidden inside them. Takht-e Sangin was not a primitive outpost at the edge of civilization. It was a highly organized religious and industrial center, operating at the crossroads of Greek, Persian, and Central Asian cultures. The main structure uncovered at the site became known as the Temple of the Oxus, named after the ancient Greek word for the Amu Darya river system. The temple itself measured roughly 100 meters across in some sections, with walls exceeding 2 meters in thickness. Those dimensions alone are impressive for a remote settlement in Central Asia during the 3rd and 2nd centuries BCE. But the real mystery lies beneath the foundations. Archaeologists discovered that the builders used multiple underground layers of compacted gravel, clay, and stone beneath the temple floors. This foundation system appears designed to stabilize the structure against flooding and seismic activity. Modern engineers studying ancient architecture have noted similarities between these layered foundations and later earthquake-resistant techniques seen in Roman and Persian construction. Yet Takht-e Sangin predates some of those systems by centuries. The site sits near active tectonic zones, where earthquakes and river erosion should have destroyed mud brick architecture long ago. Instead, major sections survived for over 2,000 years. Some researchers believe the builders intentionally created a primitive shock absorption platform beneath the temple. Others argue the survival is accidental. But what makes the debate difficult is the consistency of the engineering. The walls were not randomly assembled. Stone blocks and mud brick layers appear carefully balanced to distribute weight evenly across unstable ground. In several areas, the joints between heavy stones show surprisingly low error margins despite the absence of advanced lifting machinery or precision cutting tools. The construction materials themselves remain another unresolved puzzle. Samples of mortar taken from parts of the complex show traces of mineral compounds mixed with ash-like substances and organic materials. Similar debates surround Roman concrete, which developed unusual resistance to moisture and cracking through volcanic chemical reactions. Takht-e Sangin may have employed a regional equivalent adapted to Central Asian conditions. Some fragments display levels of durability, difficult to explain using simple mud-based binders alone. But the greatest mystery of Takht-e Sangin emerged not from its architecture, but from the extraordinary objects buried within it. The site is closely connected to the legendary Oxus treasure, one of the most mysterious collections of ancient goldwork ever discovered. The treasure, now scattered across museums including the British Museum, contains hundreds of objects linked to the ancient Oxus region. Miniature chariots, gold figurines, ceremonial weapons, bracelets, plaques, and ritual vessels. Many scholars believe at least part of the collection originated from or passed through Takht-e Sangin. What makes these artifacts so controversial is their level of microscopic precision. Some gold pieces contain engraved details so fine they are difficult to reproduce even with modern hand tools. Certain decorative lines measure less than a millimeter in width, while remaining remarkably symmetrical. Tiny soldering points connecting gold components are nearly invisible without magnification. Metallurgical analysis has shown advanced control over alloy composition, suggesting craftsmen understood how to manipulate hardness, color, and flexibility with surprising accuracy. This raises a difficult question. How did artisans operating in a distant frontier region achieve manufacturing standards comparable to Royal Persian workshops, hundreds or even thousands of kilometers away? Ancient goldsmiths obviously possessed exceptional skill, but the logistical challenge remains enormous. Takht-e Sangin was not located near the major urban centers traditionally associated with luxury production. Transporting raw materials, maintaining furnaces capable of reaching high temperatures, and training specialized craftsmen would have required a highly organized economic system. Some historians now believe the site functioned as a strategic technological hub, connecting trade networks from Persia, India, the steppe, and the Hellenistic world. The craftsmanship also shows unusual cultural blending. Greek artistic proportions appear alongside Persian symbolic motifs and Central Asian design elements. Some ritual objects even resemble early Indian ceremonial forms. Rather than representing one isolated civilization, Takht-e Sangin may have been a fusion point where different technical traditions merged and evolved together. One artifact discovered at the site intensified the mystery even further. A finely crafted bronze statue fragment believed to depict the Greek god Marsyas. The quality of the metal casting surprised Soviet archaeologists because it demonstrated advanced holocasting techniques rarely expected so far east during that period. The statue's surface finishing indicated deliberate polishing and chemical treatment to reduce corrosion. Even after centuries underground, portions retained unusual structural integrity. The weapons found at Takht-e Sangin are equally difficult to explain. Excavations uncovered thousands of arrowheads, spearheads, armor fragments, and blades. Metallurgical studies revealed controlled carbon content in some iron weapons, suggesting smiths understood methods of improving hardness and durability. Several arrowheads displayed near-identical dimensions, implying standardized production rather than random local craftsmanship. This level of uniformity hints at organized workshops operating with military efficiency. The site's religious architecture adds another layer to the mystery. Excavators found fire altars, ritual chambers, weapon offerings, and carefully arranged deposits of valuables. The temple appears to combine Greek sacred layouts with Zoroastrian-style fire worship and local Bactrian traditions. Some chambers were engineered with restricted airflow and stable internal temperatures, possibly to preserve ritual objects from humidity and oxidation. This environmental control system fascinates researchers because it suggests a sophisticated understanding of ventilation and material preservation. In some underground areas, temperatures fluctuate far less dramatically than outside desert conditions. Passive airflow channels may have been intentionally designed to reduce moisture buildup. Similar concepts would later appear in Roman bath engineering and Persian windcatcher architecture. Even the geographic placement of Takht-e Sangin remains strategically mysterious. Positioned near major river routes and trade corridors, the site controlled movement between Central Asia and regions farther south. Whoever governed the settlement likely monitored the flow of metals, luxury goods, weapons, and cultural knowledge across enormous distances. Some historians compare its role to ancient trade supercenters like Palmyra or Petra, though Takht-e Sangin remains far less understood, and then, almost without explanation, it vanished. There are no detailed surviving records describing its destruction. No definitive account of invasion, collapse, or abandonment has been found. Some researchers blame changing river systems that slowly destabilize the settlement. Others point toward the collapse of the Greco-Bactrian kingdom, nomadic invasions, or economic isolation after regional trade routes shifted. What do you think really caused the disappearance of Takht-e Sangin? Was it war, environmental collapse, or the fall of a forgotten technological center? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Volcanic hills in central Mexico conceal the ruins of Plazuelas, a forgotten city that may contain one of the strangest engineering mysteries in ancient Mesoamerica. More than 1,000 years ago, builders with no metal tools, no beasts of burden, and no known written architectural system constructed a city aligned with mountains, celestial cycles, and geometric precision. But the most disturbing discovery was not the city itself. It was a collection of carved stone miniatures that looked eerily similar to technical blueprints. Some researchers now believe Plazuelas may preserve evidence of an ancient planning system centuries ahead of what historians expected from this region. Although local farmers had known about the ruins for generations, formal archaeological investigations only intensified during the late 20th century. Excavations led by Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History revealed ceremonial plazas, pyramid foundations, stairways, residential compounds, petroglyphs, and one of the most unusual collections of carved stone models ever found in Western Mesoamerica. Most of the city dates between 600 and 900 AD during the Epiclassic period, when regional powers rose after the decline of Teotihuacan. Plazuelas immediately confused archaeologists because its urban layout appeared far more sophisticated than expected for the Bajío region. The site stretches across several terraces integrated directly into uneven volcanic terrain, yet instead of developing randomly, the city follows a remarkably controlled geometric arrangement. The central ceremonial complex contains large plazas bordered by stepped platforms and pyramidal bases positioned with strong axial symmetry. Researchers noticed that several corridors and stairways aligned towards surrounding mountain peaks, suggesting intentional astronomical or ritual orientation rather than simple practicality. This is where the mystery begins. The civilization associated with Plazuelas was never considered comparable to the Maya in mathematics or astronomy, yet some alignments resembled deliberate solar positioning systems seen across elite Mesoamerican centers. Similar architectural orientation appears at Teotihuacan, whose main avenue deviates roughly 15.5 degrees east of true north. At Plazuelas, multiple structures also display non-random angular deviations that may correspond to seasonal solar events. Archaeologists using topographic mapping discovered that the builders transformed irregular hillsides into stable ceremonial platforms with surprisingly low structural collapse rates. More than 11 centuries of seasonal rain and erosion should have destroyed much of the site entirely, yet many retaining walls and foundations remain intact. This raises a difficult engineering question. How did a regional culture with no advanced metallurgy produce such durable and geometrically controlled construction? The stones themselves add another layer to the puzzle. Many blocks show flattened faces and carefully fitted edges despite the absence of iron tools. While the masonry is not as refined as Inca polygonal stonework, it exceeds what researchers once assumed possible for societies in the Bajío region during this period. Some researchers suspect the builders used standardized measuring systems, while others argue repeated proportions throughout the complex indicate modular planning techniques. But no measuring devices have ever been found. The most controversial artifacts at Plazuelas are the carved stone models discovered near ceremonial sectors of the city. At first glance, they appear decorative, but closer examination revealed something astonishing. Many of these carvings reproduce architectural layouts with consistent proportions. Some depict plazas, stairways, ball courts, terraces, and platform arrangements that closely resemble actual structures at the site. Several even include topographic contours carved directly into volcanic stone surfaces. This has led to one of the most radical theories surrounding Plazuelas. The miniatures may have functioned as architectural planning models. If true, the implications are enormous. Most ancient civilizations known for advanced construction left behind some form of planning system. Egyptians used papyrus sketches for pyramid logistics. Romans built wax and wooden models before constructing large civic projects. Medieval architects later developed scaled cathedral drawings. But in Western Mesoamerica, evidence for pre-construction modeling is extremely rare. The Plazuelas stones may represent one of the oldest surviving examples of spatial planning models in the Americas. Researchers studying the carvings noticed recurring scale relationships between miniature features. Certain stair proportions appear mathematically consistent across different pieces, while some carved depressions align with real architectural orientations found elsewhere in the city. One particularly famous carving, unofficially nicknamed the Map Stone, contains networks of lines, circular depressions, and interconnected geometric forms. To some archaeologists, it resembles a symbolic ritual diagram, but to others it looks disturbingly similar to a terrain map or urban layout system. The precision becomes even stranger when viewed from above. Drone imaging and three-dimensional terrain scans have revealed that parts of the miniature carvings correspond surprisingly well with nearby topography. Critics argue that humans naturally impose patterns on abstract symbols, yet supporters of the blueprint theory point out that several carvings include engineering-like consistency difficult to dismiss as coincidence. The real mystery is not simply artistic skill, it is conceptual abstraction. To create accurate miniatures of large architectural spaces, builders must already understand scale reduction, spatial translation, proportional geometry, and long-term planning. That requires an intellectual framework far beyond improvised construction. Some experts now believe specialized planner priests or architect engineers may have existed within Plazuelas society. If correct, it would force historians to rethink technological organization in Western Mexico during the Epiclassic era. Even today, no consensus exists regarding the true function of these stone models, and that uncertainty is exactly what makes them so unsettling. Another unexplained feature of Plazuelas involves sound. Several plazas and ceremonial corridors produce unusually strong echoes and directional sound reflections. Visitors standing near the center of the ball court can hear voices rebound from multiple stone surfaces with surprising clarity. This phenomenon immediately reminded researchers of the famous acoustic effect at El Castillo in Chichen Itza, where clapping near the pyramid staircase produces an echo resembling the call of a quetzal bird. At Plazuelas, however, the effect appears less theatrical and more spatially distributed. Some archaeologists suspect the builders intentionally positioned terraces and retaining walls to amplify ritual performances or public ceremonies. The geometry of the plazas may have allowed priests to project their voices across large gatherings without mechanical amplification. Similar principles were later exploited in Greek amphitheatres, where curved stone seating naturally directed sound waves. But Plazuelas predates many comparable acoustic structures in the Americas. No one knows whether the sound effects were intentional or accidental, yet the repeated presence of reflective surfaces near ceremonial zones suggests deliberate experimentation with architectural acoustics may have occurred. Scattered across nearby rocks are hundreds of carved symbols, unlike standard Maya glyphs or later Aztec iconography. Many feature spirals, grids, concentric circles, intersecting lines, and abstract geometric pathways. Some researchers interpret them as ritual symbols connected to cosmology, while others propose they represent territorial maps, water systems, trade routes, or astronomical tracking systems. What makes them especially mysterious is their apparent systematic organization. Certain carvings repeat identical geometric sequences across different stones, implying shared symbolic rules. Some line clusters resemble network diagrams more than decorative art. This has inspired theories that Plazuelas preserved a localized information system now completely lost to history. The volcanic hill known as Cerro de los Quiches contains especially dense concentrations of these carvings, and surveys have documented dozens of interconnected petroglyph panels distributed across the slopes. To this day, no full decipherment exists. What do you think those mysterious stone models really were? Sacred ritual objects, ancient maps, or the surviving blueprints of a lost architectural science? Share your thoughts in the comments below. In the dry coastal desert of northern Peru, Huaca Rayada was never supposed to survive. Built from fragile adobe mud bricks in one of the harshest environments in South America, the site should have collapsed centuries ago. Instead, beneath layers of hardened clay and ritual platforms, archaeologists uncovered one of the most shocking discoveries in the history of the ancient Americas. A royal tomb filled with advanced metalwork, engineered burial systems, and artifacts so sophisticated that some researchers compared the discovery to the tomb of Tutankhamun. Yet unlike Egypt, the civilization behind it left no readable written language behind. Only symbols, only silence. Huaca Rayada remained largely ignored until 1987, when looters illegally digging at the site uncovered gold objects. Archaeologist Walter Alva arrived shortly after and began emergency excavations, expecting little more than another damaged burial site. What followed stunned the archaeological world. Buried nearly 5 meters underground was the intact tomb of the Lord of Saipan, a high-ranking ruler of the Moche civilization who lived around 250–300 AD. Unlike most ancient American royal tombs, which had been looted centuries earlier, this one remained almost untouched. Inside were more than 400 ceremonial artifacts, massive quantities of gold, silver and copper objects, elaborate headdresses and masks, sacrificed guards and attendants, exotic shells transported from Ecuador, and even textiles and wooden remains preserved for nearly 1,700 years. The discovery immediately forced historians to reconsider the Moche civilization. Before Huacarajada, many researchers believed pre-Inca societies in Peru were regionally powerful, but technologically limited compared to civilizations such as Egypt, Rome, or Han China. That assumption collapsed almost overnight. The complexity of the tombs suggested centralized political power, large-scale labor organization, long-distance trade systems, advanced engineering knowledge, and highly specialized metallurgical production. Many researchers began calling the Lord of Saipan the Tutankhamun of the Americas, but there was one major difference. The Egyptians left texts explaining their world. The Moche left almost nothing readable behind. The greatest mystery surrounding Huacarajada is not the tomb itself, but the technology hidden inside the artifacts. The Moche civilization existed nearly 1,500 years before modern industrial metallurgy in South America. They had no steel, no iron tools, no modern furnaces, no electricity, and no written chemical theory. Yet many objects discovered at Huacarajada display levels of precision that continue to puzzle scientists today. Researchers analyzing the artifacts found evidence of depletion gilding, controlled alloy engineering, electrochemical surface treatment, ultra-thin gold layering, multi-metal lamination, and high-temperature annealing cycles. Some ceremonial masks contain gold layers only a few microns thick, applied with astonishing uniformity across curved surfaces. Even under microscopic analysis, certain areas show precision difficult to achieve without highly controlled processing methods. One of the most controversial discoveries involved the use of tumbaga, a gold-copper alloy. By carefully removing copper from the outer layer through chemical treatment, Moche metalworkers could make an object appear to be nearly pure gold while using far less precious metal internally. This process required precise understanding of oxidation, heating cycles, acid-based surface reactions, and metal expansion and contraction. Modern metallurgists note that the process is extremely difficult to stabilize consistently without advanced experimentation. Comparisons became unavoidable. Ancient Egypt mastered large-scale gold production. Rome excelled at casting and military metallurgy. Han China developed sophisticated bronze engineering. But the Moche specialized in microscopic surface manipulation and visual metallurgical illusion. Some researchers argue their decorative metalworking techniques rivaled Renaissance goldsmiths in complexity. Even more mysterious is the fact that many Moche artifacts combined different metals with different thermal properties into single, ceremonial objects. Under temperature fluctuation, these metals should expand at different rates and crack apart over time. Many did not. Scientists still debate how the Moche controlled bonding stability, what exact chemical compounds were used, how they maintained consistent furnace temperatures, and whether specialized workshops existed under state control. Excavations near Huacarajada suggest organized production centers may have operated almost like proto-industrial facilities, with specialized labor divisions handling mining, smelting, polishing, alloy mixing, and ceremonial finishing. For a civilization without iron tools or written technical manuals, the sophistication appears deeply out of place. Northern coastal Peru is brutal for preservation. The region experiences high salt exposure, wind erosion, extreme temperature variation, seismic instability, and periodic El Niño flooding events. Yet inside Huaca Rajada, archaeologists discovered preserved wooden coffin fragments, woven textiles, feathers, human remains, and organic binding materials. Some experts believe the tomb chambers were intentionally engineered to control airflow and humidity. The adobe layers surrounding the burial acted almost like environmental insulation, while certain chambers appear to have been sealed using compacted clay mixtures with unusually high density. Researchers still do not fully understand the composition of the adobe mixtures, whether organic stabilizers were added, how moisture infiltration was minimized, or why some chambers preserved materials far better than expected. Compared to many Egyptian tombs, which relied heavily on dry desert isolation, Huaca Rajada survived in a far more unstable environment. That raises a disturbing possibility. The Moche may have understood practical environmental engineering at a level historians previously underestimated. Huaca Rajada was constructed primarily from adobe mud bricks, one of the weakest large-scale building materials in the ancient world. Adobe structures are highly vulnerable to rain erosion, earthquakes, structural cracking, and groundwater damage. Yet major sections of the complex survived nearly 2 millennia. Archaeologists identified several unusual construction features, including highly standardized brick dimensions, layered load distribution systems, alternating fill density, and compacted reinforcement zones. Some walls contain thousands of bricks arranged in patterns that appear designed to disperse seismic stress. This is especially shocking because Peru sits directly on the Pacific Ring of Fire, one of the most earthquake-prone regions on Earth. Modern structural engineers studying ancient Andean construction have noted similarities between certain Moche stabilization techniques and later anti-seismic principles seen in Inca masonry. One theory suggests the builders intentionally created flexible structural layers that could absorb movement during earthquakes, rather than resisting it rigidly. If true, the Moche may have discovered primitive seismic engineering over 1,000 years before many Old World civilizations developed similar concepts. The Lord of Saipan was not buried alone. Inside the tomb were sacrificed warriors, attendants, women, animals, and guards positioned strategically around the chamber. One guard had his feet deliberately amputated before burial, possibly to symbolically force him to remain at his post forever. The arrangement of bodies appears mathematically deliberate. Researchers notice patterns in body orientation, artifact placement, ceremonial spacing, and symbolic hierarchy. Some scholars believe the tomb operated almost like a ritualized cosmological map, but because the Moche left no deciphered writing system, the true meaning remains unknown. This creates one of the most frustrating mysteries in archaeology: a civilization technologically advanced enough to engineer sophisticated metallurgy and monumental construction, yet almost completely silent in written language. How did a civilization without iron tools, wheels, or written science build engineering systems powerful enough to survive in one of the harshest deserts on Earth for centuries? Do you think the Moche possessed knowledge we still do not fully understand? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Inside the Superstition Mountains of Arizona, a collection of carved stones may contain one of the strangest mysteries in North America. A system of maps, symbols, and coded directions so complex that some researchers believe it functioned more like an ancient cryptographic device than a treasure map. Even after more than a century of investigation, no one fully agrees on who created the Peralta stones, how they encoded geographic information with such precision, or why parts of the system appear to require astronomical alignment and multi-layer decoding to work. The so-called Peralta stones surfaced publicly in the mid-20th century after several artifacts were reportedly found in the deserts surrounding the Superstition Mountains east of Phoenix, Arizona. The stones quickly became linked to the legend of the Lost Dutchman's gold mine, one of the most famous treasure stories in American history. But as researchers examined the carvings more closely, the mystery expanded far beyond hidden gold. Some stones appeared to depict mountain ridges, canyons, water routes, and directional markers with uncanny similarity to real topography. Others contained symbols, geometric forms, and layered patterns that resembled coded systems rather than ordinary navigation tools. The most disturbing aspect of the Peralta stones is not the treasure legend. It is the possibility that the stones were designed as a primitive form of cryptographic mapping, centuries before modern encryption systems existed. Unlike conventional maps, the stones cannot simply be read from left to right. Researchers discovered that many carvings only begin to make sense when the stones are rotated at precise angles or combined with other stones in a specific order. Certain lines align only when viewed diagonally. Some symbols appear inverted unless observed under angled sunlight. Others reveal matching patterns only after overlay comparisons. This has led some investigators to compare the system to mechanical encryption. In modern cryptography, layered encoding prevents unauthorized interpretation unless the observer possesses the correct sequence orientational key. The Peralta stones appear to operate in a strangely similar way. Several researchers noted that the carvings seem intentionally designed to hide information from anyone unfamiliar with the system's internal logic. One stone, often referred to as the heart stone, contains pathways and directional indicators that some believe correspond to actual trails inside the Superstition Mountains. Yet the routes appear distorted until the stone is rotated approximately 45 degrees relative to magnetic north. Another stone contains repeated symbols that only align into coherent directional sequences when paired with neighboring artifacts. This is what makes the mystery so unusual. If the stones are fraudulent, their creator demonstrated an unexpectedly advanced understanding of layered symbolic encoding. But if they're authentic, then someone operating in the deserts of the American Southwest may have developed a highly sophisticated geographic encryption system long before aerial surveying or modern cartography. The comparison becomes even stranger when researchers overlay the carvings onto real satellite imagery of the Superstition Mountains. Several independent studies have claimed approximate alignments between the stone patterns and real geological formations, including canyon forks and volcanic ridges. While critics argue that pattern matching can easily produce false positives, supporters point out that some proportional relationships appear statistically difficult to dismiss as coincidence. The mountains themselves complicate the puzzle further. The Superstition Range was shaped by intense volcanic activity roughly 18 to 25 million years ago. The terrain contains collapsing lava tubes, unstable ridges, hidden ravines, and severe erosion zones. In such an environment, a normal paper map would quickly become obsolete over generations. A coded multi-reference system carved into stone would survive far longer and resist accidental discovery. Some researchers even propose that the stones functioned as a security mechanism rather than a map, a system intentionally designed to prevent outsiders from locating a hidden mining site. Another unresolved mystery involves the carving methods themselves. Several Peralta stones contain remarkably deep and consistent grooves. The line widths remain unusually uniform across long sections, and some curves display near-symmetrical geometry difficult to achieve with improvised frontier tools. Microscopic examinations performed by independent enthusiasts suggested that some grooves may have been created using hardened metal tools or grinding instruments rather than crude chisels. Although no definitive academic study has confirmed these claims, the visual consistency of the carvings continues to fuel debate. This becomes important because the traditional narrative associates the stones with 19th century miners explorers, or settlers operating in harsh desert conditions. Yet some of the engraving quality appears closer to controlled workshop craftsmanship than improvised field carving. Several geometric symbols also demonstrate accurate angular relationships. Certain intersecting lines maintain nearly identical directional offsets across multiple stones, implying deliberate measurement rather than artistic decoration. The question becomes difficult to ignore. How did individuals supposedly operating in isolated desert territory produce a coordinated symbolic system requiring advanced carving precision, directional awareness, and topographic abstraction? One of the strongest arguments surrounding the stones involves perspective. Some carvings resemble elevated or aerial representations of terrain. Long before aircraft, drones, or satellite imaging, the creators somehow encoded large-scale geographic relationships into compact symbolic diagrams. This comparison often brings researchers to other controversial historical maps. The Piri Reis map of 16th century Ottoman origin appeared to contain surprisingly accurate coastal representations. The Nazca lines of Peru only fully reveal their geometric scale from high altitude. Certain ancient Polynesian navigation systems encoded ocean geography through symbolic wave mapping rather than direct illustration. The Peralta stones seem to belong to the same category of impossible perspective problems. How could someone map terrain in a way resembling modern topographic reduction without access to aerial observation? Some skeptics argue that the similarities are exaggerated by treasure hunters searching for patterns. Yet supporters point out that certain proportional relationships between mountain gaps, ridge angles, and canyon splits remain surprisingly close to the real landscape. Whether coincidence or intention, the resemblance continues to attract investigators more than a century later. Another theory proposes that parts of the stone system relied on celestial positioning. Several symbols resemble solar markers, crescents, directional arrows, or radial star patterns. Some treasure researchers claimed that specific carvings correspond to seasonal sunrise angles across the Superstition Mountains. If true, the system may have combined terrain navigation with astronomical timing. This would not be unprecedented. Ancient civilizations across the Americas frequently integrated astronomy into architecture and orientation systems. Chaco Canyon structures align with solar cycles. Maya observatories tracked Venus with astonishing precision. At Machu Picchu, carved stones interact with seasonal sunlight during solstices. The Peralta stones may represent a smaller but equally sophisticated adaptation of the same principle. In a desert where landmarks shift visually under changing light conditions, solar alignment could function as a navigational verification system. A pathway visible at sunrise during winter may disappear entirely under summer shadows. That possibility transforms the stones from treasure markers into something much more complex. A hybrid system combining geography, astronomy, and symbolic encryption. The legend surrounding the Lost Dutchman mine adds another layer of mystery because no confirmed massive gold source has ever been found despite decades of searching. According to historical accounts, rich ore deposits existed somewhere inside the Superstition Mountains, yet modern expeditions repeatedly fail to locate any mine matching the legendary descriptions. Geologists point out that the mountain range is extraordinarily unstable. Volcanic uplift, erosion, rockfall, and shifting debris fields constantly alter the terrain. Narrow canyon entrances can collapse. Hidden shafts may disappear beneath landslides. Floodwater erosion can completely reshape dry channels in only a few decades. This raises a haunting possibility. Perhaps the stones once pointed to a real location, but the landscape itself no longer exists in the same form. In that scenario, the greatest obstacle is not decoding the stones. It is reconstructing a geological environment erased by time. So what do you think the Peralta stones really are? An elaborate hoax, a hidden treasure map, or evidence of a forgotten system of ancient geographic encryption far ahead of its time? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. In the mountains of southern Iran, near modern-day Fuzuabad, lies an ancient city so geometrically precise that archaeologists still debate how it was planned nearly 1800 years ago. Its streets radiate outward in near-perfect symmetry. Its massive domes survived earthquakes, heat, and centuries of collapse. And hidden inside its ruins is one of the most durable ancient construction materials ever discovered. A mortar so resilient that parts of the city still stand after almost 2 millennia. Fuzuabad does not look like a city that evolved naturally over time. It looks engineered. The ruins of ancient Ardashir, Quara, the Sassanid capital of Fuzuabad, were known locally for centuries, but systematic archaeological research accelerated during the 20th century. French and Iranian archaeologists mapped the circular city, revealing a diameter of nearly 2 kilometers and roads radiating from a central core with astonishing geometric consistency. Excavations uncovered the remains of canals, defensive walls, bridges, ceremonial structures, and the famous Palace of Ardashir. Surveys also revealed advanced hydraulic engineering beneath the city, including water diversion systems designed to control seasonal flooding. Later architectural studies showed that the palace's domes were among the earliest large-scale examples of fully developed Persian vaulted engineering. Each excavation raised more questions than answers. The deeper researchers studied Fuzuabad, the less it resembled a normal 3rd century city. The greatest mystery of Fuzuabad begins with its shape. Most ancient cities evolved chaotically. Roads expanded over generations, districts formed unevenly, but Fuzuabad appears to have been designed almost entirely before construction began. The city forms a near-perfect circle with radial avenues extending outward from a central tower. Some historians compare the layout to Renaissance ideal cities designed more than 1,000 years later. Creating a circle on this scale without aerial surveying or modern instruments should have been extraordinarily difficult. Even Roman colonial cities, famous for engineering precision, usually followed rectangular grid systems because circles were much harder to maintain accurately over long distances. Yet the error margin in Fuzuabad's geometry appears surprisingly small. Archaeologists believe the builders may have used a central pivot system with ropes and measurement stakes, but reproducing this precision across nearly 2 kilometers of terrain would still require exceptional mathematical planning. Some researchers have compared Fuzuabad's geometry to later Islamic urban planning and even early modern fortress cities in Europe. The unsettling question is whether Sassanid engineers possessed surveying methods far more advanced than historians currently assume. At the exact center of the city once stood a massive structure known as the Minar or Tubal Tower. Today only fragments remain, but reconstruction suggests it may have reached more than 30 meters in height. Its purpose remains uncertain. Some scholars argue it was a ceremonial fire tower connected to Zoroastrian rituals. Others believe it served as a military observation point. But another theory continues to attract attention. The tower may have functioned as the mathematical and astronomical anchor of the entire city. The roads of Fuzuabad converge toward this central point with unusual precision. Certain researchers have proposed that the city may have incorporated solar or celestial alignments connected to royal symbolism. Although evidence remains inconclusive, the theory persists because the geometry of the city appears too deliberate to be purely decorative. In many ancient civilizations, from Teotihuacan in Mexico to Angkor in Cambodia, astronomy and urban planning were deeply connected. Fuzuabad may represent the Persian version of that same phenomenon. The most technically fascinating mystery in Fuzuabad may be its construction material. Large portions of the palace walls and domes still remain structurally stable after nearly 18 centuries of exposure to heat, seasonal flooding, earthquakes, and erosion. Engineers studying the ruins discovered that the mortar binding many of the stones possesses unusually high resistance to environmental damage. The mixture appears to contain lime compounds combined with ash, clay, and mineral aggregates, but the exact formula and production process remain debated. Some sections demonstrate resistance to cracking that exceeds expectations for ordinary ancient lime mortar. Researchers often compare this mystery to Roman concrete, whose volcanic ash chemistry allowed structures like the Pantheon to survive for almost 2,000 years. But Fuzuabad presents a different puzzle. Unlike Roman marine concrete, the Sassanid mortar had to survive an arid environment with dramatic temperature fluctuations that regularly expand and contract stone surfaces. In some surviving chambers, mortar joints remain remarkably compact despite centuries of pressure from heavy domes overhead. This suggests the builders may have understood not only chemistry, but also long-term structural stress distribution. Modern restoration teams have struggled to reproduce the exact durability observed in some original sections of the palace. That fact alone has fueled theories that Sassanid engineers possessed specialized material knowledge now partially lost. The question becomes even more intriguing when compared with neighboring civilizations. Many Roman-era buildings in harsher climates collapsed long ago, yet parts of Fuzuabad's palace continue standing with surprising stability. Something about the material was different. The domes of the Palace of Ardashir remain among the earliest large-scale domed structures in Persian history. Some chambers rise nearly 18 meters high, supported without modern reinforcement. This creates another major historical problem. In the 3rd century, constructing wide domes required solving enormous weight distribution challenges. If pressure was transferred unevenly, walls would crack outward and collapse. Even the Romans, masters of concrete engineering, needed centuries of experimentation before achieving stable, monumental domes like the Pantheon. Yet the Sassanid builders at Fuzuabad created soaring vaulted spaces using brick, stone and mortar with remarkable confidence. Architectural historians believe the palace may contain early forms of pendentive transition systems, techniques later perfected in Byzantine architecture, including structures like Hagia Sophia. If true, Fuzuabad may represent a missing evolutionary stage in the history of dome engineering. What shocks many researchers is not merely the existence of the domes, but how suddenly the technology appears. There is little evidence of a long experimental phase leading up to Fuzuabad. The engineering seems to emerge almost fully developed. Fuzuabad sits in a valley historically vulnerable to flooding. Ancient sources describe the region as difficult to control because water frequently overwhelmed settlements. According to later Persian traditions, even armies associated with Alexander the Great struggled to manage the area. Yet the Sassanids transformed the valley into a functioning capital through a sophisticated hydraulic network. Excavations revealed canals, embankments, and water diversion systems capable of redirecting seasonal flow. Some channels appear to have been carved directly through dense geological formations. Archaeologists estimate that portions of the system would have required coordinated labor on a massive scale. The engineering challenge was immense. Seasonal flash floods in southern Iran can produce destructive surges capable of eroding stone foundations within decades. But Fuzuabad's infrastructure endured for centuries. The system demonstrates something often underestimated about ancient civilizations. Mastery over water was frequently more important than mastery over war. One of the lesser-known mysteries of Fuzuabad is its natural climate control system. Thick walls, curved corridors, and carefully positioned openings appear to guide airflow in ways that cooled interior spaces naturally. Even today, some parts of the palace remain noticeably cooler than the outside environment. Many engineers believe this technique was an early version of the famous Persian wind-catching systems, developed centuries later. In a region where summer temperatures often exceed 40 degrees Celsius, the ability to cool massive structures without mechanical technology suggests that Sassanid builders possessed an advanced understanding of environmental engineering and airflow control. What do you think made Fuzuabad so advanced for its time? Was it the result of forgotten engineering knowledge, or simply a civilization far ahead of what history expected? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Southwestern Bulgaria still hides the remains of Nicopolis ad Nestum, a Roman city that should have collapsed long ago. Earthquakes, freezing winters, invasions, floods, and nearly 2,000 years of erosion should have destroyed it completely. Yet beneath layers of soil, archaeologists uncovered drainage tunnels that still function, stone roads that barely shifted, and a public heating system whose efficiency modern researchers still struggle to fully explain. The deeper excavations went, the stranger the city became. Nicopolis ad Nestum was founded around 106 AD during the reign of Emperor Trajan after Rome defeated the Dacians. Ancient texts mention the city, but for centuries its exact location remained uncertain. Large-scale excavations only accelerated during the 20th century when archaeologists identified massive buried walls, Roman streets, bath complexes, and public buildings beneath agricultural land near the town of Garman. What shocked researchers was not the existence of the city itself, but its level of preservation. Beneath collapsed stone and soil layers, entire infrastructure systems remained recognizable. Archaeologists discovered sections of paved streets, drainage channels, workshops, ceramic pipelines, and foundations engineered with a precision unexpected for a relatively remote Balkan settlement. The city covered roughly 25 hectares, protected by walls almost 2 meters thick in some areas, yet its engineering quality resembled cities much closer to the Mediterranean core of the Roman Empire. One of the first mysteries surrounding Nicopolis ad Nestum involves its roads. Roman roads are famous for durability, but the survival of sections here is unusually difficult to explain because of the region's harsh climate. Southwestern Bulgaria experiences seasonal freezing, heavy rainfall, soil expansion, and seismic activity, conditions that slowly destroy most ancient pavement systems. Excavations revealed that the streets were not simply paved with stone slabs. Beneath them lay multiple engineered layers including compacted gravel for drainage, crushed stone for load distribution, tightly interlocked paving stones, and moisture control layers beneath the surface. Modern geotechnical studies show that multi-layer road systems dramatically reduce structural stress. What makes Nicopolis unusual is that these principles were applied with remarkable consistency despite the city being located far from Rome itself. Some foundation blocks also appear intentionally separated by smaller stone fragments acting as pressure absorbers, a concept surprisingly similar to principles used in anti-seismic construction today. Archaeologists comparing the site with structures in Pompeii and Jerash noticed that certain foundation patterns at Nicopolis were unusually adaptable for unstable terrain. This raises a major question. Did Roman engineers possess standardized regional seismic building knowledge far more advanced than surviving texts suggest? The most fascinating engineering mystery at Nicopolis ad Nestum lies beneath the ruins of its bathhouse complex. Roman baths used a system called hypocaust heating, where hot air generated by furnaces traveled beneath raised floors and inside hollow wall cavities, warming entire rooms. Similar systems existed across the empire, but Nicopolis presents several unresolved problems that continue to puzzle researchers. Archaeologists uncovered underground heating chambers, elevated flooring supported by small brick pillars, ceramic wall tubes designed for heat circulation, carefully controlled airflow passages, and layered insulation materials beneath heated sections. What confuses researchers is the efficiency implied by the structure. The Balkan winters in this region can fall below freezing for extended periods, and maintaining a heated bath complex in such conditions would normally require enormous fuel consumption. Yet evidence suggests the system may have operated far more efficiently than earlier models predicted. Thermal reconstructions indicate that some rooms could potentially maintain temperatures between 30 and 40 degrees Celsius, with lower fuel usage than expected. The layout appears specifically optimized to recycle heat instead of simply generating more of it. Some theories suggest airflow tunnels were designed to accelerate natural convection. Furnaces may have burned at extremely high efficiency. Heat-retaining ceramic compositions reduced thermal loss, and wall channels redistributed hot air more evenly than standard Roman designs. Even more intriguing is the possibility that local engineers adapted Mediterranean Roman technology, specifically for cold Balkan climates. The unanswered question is not whether Romans understood heating systems. They clearly did. The real mystery is how a provincial city achieved a level of thermal optimization sophisticated enough to resemble principles used in modern passive heating architecture. Several researchers have compared the bath system to more advanced examples found in Ephesus and Bath. Yet Nicopolis remains far less studied despite showing engineering adaptations potentially unique to colder environments. Another major puzzle is the city's underground drainage system. Archaeologists discovered stone-lined channels running beneath major streets with gradients engineered precisely enough for water to continue flowing naturally after nearly 17 centuries. Some channels remain structurally stable despite repeated earthquakes and soil movement. The system reveals several advanced characteristics including angled runoff management, sediment control sections, overflow redirection, underground routing beneath dense urban zones, and waterproof mortar layers in selected areas. Hydraulic mortar used by Romans often contained volcanic ash known as pozzolana. This material chemically reacts with water and becomes stronger over time. However, volcanic ash sources were limited geographically, raising questions about how frontier cities like Nicopolis obtained or replicated such durable mixtures. Material analyses from Roman hydraulic structures elsewhere in the empire show crystalline growth patterns that actually reinforce the concrete over centuries. Similar long-term durability may partially explain why some underground systems at Nicopolis survived, but researchers still debate whether local builders imported specialized materials or developed regional alternatives. The city's water infrastructure also appears unusually resilient compared with many nearby settlements from the same era that deteriorated far more rapidly. Nicopolis ad Nestum suffered repeated disasters. Historical evidence suggests Gothic invasions damaged the city during the 3rd century. Earthquakes likely struck the region multiple times, while later Byzantine conflicts further destabilized the settlement. Yet excavations show the city was rebuilt repeatedly using nearly identical urban planning. Street alignments remained consistent, drainage channels were restored instead of abandoned, and public structures were reconstructed on existing foundations. This implies the existence of standardized measurements, organized engineering records, or inherited construction traditions capable of surviving generations of destruction. Some reconstructed walls even reused earlier stone blocks while maintaining remarkable structural balance. Modern restoration engineers note that reusing damaged ancient material without destabilizing a structure is extremely difficult, especially without modern calculations. Yet Roman builders at Nicopolis managed it repeatedly. So what do you think? Was Nicopolis ad Nestum simply an overlooked Roman frontier city, or does it reveal that ancient engineering knowledge was far more advanced and widespread than historians once believed? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. In the dry plains near Kafir Kala, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a fortress city built largely from mud brick and packed earth, materials that should have vanished centuries ago. Instead, parts of its defensive walls still survive after nearly 2,000 years of heat, winter freezes, erosion, and desert winds. What stands at Kafir Kala is not simply a ruined Silk Road settlement. It is evidence that an ancient civilization may have mastered engineering techniques modern researchers still struggle to fully explain. For decades, Kafir Kala remained overshadowed by nearby Samarkand, one of Central Asia's most famous ancient cities. Yet excavations gradually revealed that this site was once a major Sogdian administrative centre, operating between the 5th and 8th centuries CE. The Sogdians were among the most influential merchants of the Silk Road, controlling trade routes stretching thousands of kilometres from China to Persia. Unlike Rome or Han China, however, much of their technology was built not in marble or granite, but in earth itself. The first archaeological surveys identified large fortification walls and traces of palace-like compounds. Later excavations uncovered seals, storage areas, administrative rooms, and remnants of sophisticated urban planning. Each new layer suggested the same disturbing possibility. This was not a primitive desert outpost. It was a carefully engineered centre designed for long-term survival in one of the harshest climates in Central Asia. The greatest mystery of Kafir Kala is its walls. Most ancient mud brick structures decay rapidly. Rainwater dissolves surfaces. Temperature shifts crack the material. Wind erosion strips away layers year after year. In many regions, mud brick buildings can collapse within decades without continuous maintenance. Yet sections of Kafir Kala's fortifications remained recognizable after nearly 2 millennia. This should not have happened. Modern engineers understand that earthen architecture is vulnerable to thermal expansion and moisture cycles. The Samarkand region experiences temperature swings exceeding 40 degrees Celsius annually. Summers can rise above 40 degrees Celsius, while winters regularly fall below freezing. Such fluctuations normally destroy untreated earth structures over time, but Kafir Kala resisted. Archaeological analysis revealed that the walls were not random piles of compacted dirt. They were built in layered compression systems, using carefully controlled mixtures of clay, sand, and organic fibers. Some sections appear to contain finely distributed plant material, possibly straw or reed fragments, which may have reduced cracking during drying. Researchers also identified repeated compression layers, suggesting systematic engineering rather than simple manual piling. What makes this remarkable is the scale. Some fortification sections were several meters thick, comparable in mass to parts of Roman frontier walls. Yet unlike Roman concrete, the Sogdians achieved this durability primarily using local earth materials. Even today, recreating ancient earthen compounds with identical long-term resistance remains difficult. Experimental reconstructions often fail within decades under simulated weathering. The comparison becomes even more striking when viewed against other ancient sites. Large mud brick cities in Mesopotamia, including parts of Babylon, suffered catastrophic erosion over centuries and required constant rebuilding. Many earthen fortresses along the Silk Road disappeared almost entirely beneath the desert. Kafir Kala, however, preserved recognizable structural geometry despite centuries of abandonment. This raises an uncomfortable question. Did the Sogdians understand material behavior far better than historians previously assumed? Excavations also revealed another mystery hidden within the fortress design itself. Kafir Kala's defensive layout was unexpectedly advanced for an earth-built stronghold. Instead of relying on a single perimeter wall, the city used layered defensive zones, narrow access corridors, and angled watchtower positions that created overlapping fields of vision. Military historians noticed similarities between these layouts and much later medieval defensive concepts. Attackers approaching certain gates would have been forced to slow down, change direction, and expose themselves to defenders positioned above. Blind spots were minimized through geometric tower placement. Some corridors appear intentionally compressed to control troop movement. What is extraordinary is that these calculations were applied to mud brick architecture. Stone fortresses can absorb enormous structural stress. Earth structures behave differently. Their stability depends heavily on weight distribution, moisture content, and compression density. Constructing multi-layered defensive systems from such materials required a deep practical understanding of structural mechanics, even if ancient builders never expressed it mathematically. Archaeologists also became increasingly fascinated by the site's water management systems. Water is the greatest enemy of earthen architecture. Once moisture penetrates foundational layers, erosion accelerates rapidly. Yet Kafir Kala existed within a region shaped by irrigation canals and seasonal water fluctuations. Geological surveys suggest that the builders intentionally elevated certain platforms above surrounding terrain while incorporating drainage gradients subtle enough to redirect water flow away from critical foundations. Some buried layers contain gravel filtration zones beneath packed earth flooring. Similar techniques appear in later Persian and Islamic engineering traditions, but Kafir Kala may represent an earlier regional adaptation. Modern hydrological studies indicate that even slight slope adjustments of less than 2 degrees can dramatically reduce erosion rates in earthen structures. In other words, the survival of Kafir Kala may not be accidental. It may be the result of highly optimized environmental engineering. As excavations expanded, archaeologists uncovered evidence that the city functioned not merely as a fortress, but as a powerful administrative center of the Silk Road. Clay ceilings, storage complexes, and administrative chambers pointed toward organized taxation, trade regulation, and logistical coordination. The scale of the Sogdian trade network was enormous. Historical records suggest Sogdian merchants operated caravans across more than 4,000 kilometers of interconnected routes, linking Chang'an in China to Persian and Byzantine territories. Maintaining such systems required communication networks, financial coordination, and security infrastructure on a level rarely associated with Central Asian civilizations in popular history. Yet the documentary evidence is fragmented. Unlike Rome or China, the Sogdians left behind relatively limited surviving archives. Much of what scholars know comes indirectly through Chinese diplomatic records and scattered inscriptions. Kafir Kala therefore represents something rare, physical evidence of civilization whose organizational complexity may have exceeded what its surviving texts imply. Then came signs of destruction. Excavation layers revealed heavy burn traces, collapsed sections, and thick ash deposits. Some archaeologists connect these events to the Arab conquests of Central Asia during the 8th century. Others suggest internal conflicts or Silk Road instability may have contributed to the city's decline. But another mystery remains unresolved. Why did such an important center vanish so completely from wider historical memory? Major Silk Road cities usually leave strong cultural continuity. Samarkand survived. Bukhara survived. Yet Kafir Kala faded into obscurity beneath layers of earth and silence. For centuries, even its scale was underestimated. What do you think made the walls of Kafir Kala survive for nearly 2,000 years in such a harsh desert climate? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Cumbemayo sits more than 3,300 meters above sea level in the northern Peruvian Andes, roughly 20 kilometers southwest of the city of Cajamarca. The site was first documented in detail by modern researchers during the 19th and early 20th centuries, though local communities had known about the strange stone canals for centuries. What immediately shocked archaeologists was not the scale of the ruins, but the engineering hidden inside them. Carved directly into volcanic rock was an artificial water channel stretching nearly 9 kilometers across mountain terrain, where such precision should have been almost impossible for a prehistoric society. Radiocarbon studies and ceramic analysis suggest that parts of the complex date to roughly 1500 to 1200 BCE, making the system more than 3,000 years old. That means Cumbemayo existed long before the rise of the Inca Empire, and possibly even before many of the sophisticated hydraulic systems of the ancient Mediterranean world. Some researchers now classify it as one of the earliest known large-scale water management systems in the Americas. The first surveys revealed something even stranger. The canal was not built randomly downhill. Instead, it maintained an extremely controlled gradient over long distances, guiding water through harsh Andean rock formations with a level of planning that many historians did not expect from such an early civilization. The central mystery of Cumbemayo is the canal itself. The structure cuts directly through volcanic bedrock, sometimes only a few centimeters from steep drops and fractured stone surfaces. Even after thousands of years of earthquakes, seasonal flooding, and extreme weather, parts of the canal still function. Modern hydraulic engineers studying ancient water systems have pointed out that the canal's slope appears intentionally optimized. If the water moved too slowly, sediment would accumulate and block the flow. If it moved too quickly, erosion would destroy the channel walls. Yet Cumbemayo balances these forces with surprising precision. Some sections contain sharp zigzag turns that seem unnecessary at first glance, but engineers now believe these bends may have acted as primitive hydraulic brakes, slowing the water and reducing pressure damage during heavy seasonal flow. Similar concepts appear in much later hydraulic systems, including Roman aqueduct overflow controls and Nabatean water channels at Petra. Yet Petra flourished more than 1,000 years later. Researchers comparing the gradients of Cumbemayo to modern irrigation standards found that several sections remain within ranges still considered efficient for controlled gravity-fed water transport. The fact that prehistoric builders achieved this without iron tools, modern surveying equipment, or wheeled transport remains one of the greatest mysteries of the site. Another major puzzle involves the rock-cutting techniques themselves. Many canal walls display unusually smooth surfaces and remarkably consistent edges, while some channels form near-perfect angles inside extremely hard volcanic stone. Experimental archaeologists have attempted to reproduce similar cuts using stone hammers alone. While possible on a small scale, reproducing the long continuous channels of Cumbemayo would require enormous labor and exceptional planning, with some estimates suggesting tens of thousands of hours of coordinated carving. The mystery deepens because several surfaces appear polished rather than simply broken apart. Certain grooves are so straight that they resemble marks left by controlled abrasion techniques instead of random percussion. Researchers have proposed repeated grinding using quartz-rich sand, controlled water abrasion, heating and cooling the rock to weaken fracture zones, or the use of extremely hard hammerstones transported from distant areas. None of these theories fully explain the consistency seen across the entire canal network. Comparisons are often made with the granite cutting precision of ancient Egypt, the polygonal masonry of Sacsayhuaman, and the hydraulic tunnels of Persia. Yet Cumbemayo predates many of these achievements by centuries or even millennia. One of the most controversial theories surrounding Cumbemayo is that the builders may have intentionally redirected water between different drainage systems of the Andes. The site lies close to a continental watershed divide. Water on one side eventually flows toward the Pacific Ocean, while water on the other side feeds river systems connected to the Amazon basin. Some archaeologists believe the canal may have been designed to manipulate this natural boundary. If true, this would represent one of the earliest known examples of interbasin hydraulic engineering in the Americas. Such a project would require advanced understanding of seasonal rainfall patterns, elevation changes, flow pressure, terrain mapping, and long-term erosion behavior. Even modern engineers working in mountainous terrain rely heavily on precision measurements to avoid catastrophic water instability. The idea that a prehistoric Andean culture achieved a stable transfer system more than 3,000 years ago remains deeply controversial. Satellite mapping and terrain analysis conducted in recent decades have strengthened the argument that the canal's route was carefully planned rather than naturally formed. Perhaps the most difficult mystery to explain is durability. The Andes experience intense environmental stress, including rapid temperature fluctuations, heavy seasonal rain, strong winds, and seismic activity. Under such conditions, exposed stone channels normally degrade rapidly, yet many sections of Cumbemayo remain sharply defined after 3 millennia. Hydrologists studying the site observed that several channel sections appear intentionally designed to reduce turbulence. Curved walls and controlled narrowing points may have minimized destructive water impact. In some places, the rock surfaces are smoother than surrounding natural formations, suggesting deliberate finishing methods. The durability comparison becomes even more striking when placed beside modern infrastructure. Some 20th century concrete irrigation channels in Peru have required major repairs after only a few decades of erosion exposure, while portions of Cumbemayo have survived since the late Bronze Age. This has led some researchers to argue that the builders possessed a surprisingly advanced empirical understanding of long-term hydraulic stability. Cumbemayo may not have been purely functional. Surrounding the canal system is a strange volcanic stone landscape known as Los Frailones, filled with towering rock formations shaped like human figures, animals, and pillars. Some archaeologists believe the builders intentionally integrated these natural formations into ceremonial architecture. Petroglyphs carved into nearby rocks include zigzag patterns, animal figures, abstract symbols, and flowing line motifs connected to water imagery. Several carvings are positioned directly beside canal intersections, suggesting that water itself may have held sacred meaning. Anthropologists studying early Andean belief systems note that mountain water sources were often associated with fertility, cosmic order, and divine power. At Cumbemayo, the engineering may have served both practical and religious purposes simultaneously. Acoustic studies have also produced unusual findings. Wind moving through narrow stone corridors creates resonant tones and whistling effects that some researchers think were intentionally incorporated into ceremonial experiences. This transforms Cumbemayo from a simple irrigation site into something far stranger, a fusion of engineering, landscape manipulation, and ritual design. What do you think Cumbemayo really was? An ancient engineering breakthrough far ahead of its time, or evidence that lost knowledge once existed in the Andes long before recorded history? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. In the humid lowlands of southern Mexico, near the San Pedro Mata River in the state of Tabasco, archaeologists uncovered the remains of Moral Reforma, a forgotten Maya city hidden beneath dense jungle and flood-prone wetlands. The site was first reported in the early 20th century, but major excavations only intensified decades later when researchers realized the city was far larger and more advanced than previously believed. Each excavation season revealed something new. Massive pyramids emerged from beneath layers of vegetation. Stone monuments covered in hieroglyphs identified rulers linked to powerful Maya kingdoms such as Calakmul. Later surveys uncovered plazas, elevated platforms, drainage systems, and evidence of large-scale engineering in terrain considered extremely unstable for monumental construction. What shocked researchers most was the location itself. Moral Reforma was not built on hard mountain bedrock like many famous ancient cities. It stood in a swampy river basin with soft alluvial soil, seasonal flooding, and annual rainfall exceeding 2,000 millimeters. Modern civil engineering often struggles in such terrain without deep reinforced foundations. Yet the Maya built pyramids more than 27 meters tall here over 1,200 years ago, and many structures still remain standing. That contradiction became the beginning of one of the most overlooked engineering mysteries in the ancient Americas. The greatest mystery surrounding Moral Reforma is how its builders stabilized enormous stone structures on terrain that should have collapsed under their weight. Geological studies around the site show high concentrations of clay, saturated sediment, and flood deposits. Such soil behaves unpredictably under pressure. In modern construction, engineers usually solve this problem using deep concrete piles or steel reinforcement. The Maya had neither. Excavations beneath several ceremonial platforms revealed layered construction methods, unlike ordinary Maya foundations. Archaeologists discovered alternating levels of compacted earth, crushed limestone, gravel, and organic material carefully arranged to distribute pressure across a broader surface area. Some researchers compared the concept to modern floating foundation systems used in wetland construction today. The engineering becomes even more impressive when considering the climate. Tabasco's tropical rains rapidly erode exposed surfaces. Many colonial-era structures built only a few centuries ago in nearby regions have deteriorated more severely than the much older Maya remains at Moral Reforma. Satellite imaging and LiDAR scans suggest the city may also have been artificially elevated over time through repeated layers of engineered fill. If correct, the Maya were effectively reshaping the landscape itself to create stable urban terrain in an environment naturally hostile to permanent architecture. This raises an uncomfortable question for historians. How much practical geotechnical knowledge did the Maya truly possess? The ancient city existed in a region where water was both life and threat. Seasonal floods could transform the surrounding terrain into a vast marshland within weeks. Yet Moral Reforma survived for centuries as a major political and ceremonial centre. Archaeologists later identified traces of canals, embankments, reservoirs, and raised causeways extending around the urban core. Some channels possess gradients so subtle that modern researchers initially believed they could not have functioned effectively. Yet sediment analysis indicates controlled water movement likely occurred through them for long periods. The system appears designed not only to drain floodwater, but also to regulate moisture levels across agricultural zones surrounding the city. This resembles hydraulic strategies seen at Angkor Wat in Cambodia, where vast reservoirs and canals supported dense urban populations centuries before modern hydrology. What makes Moral Reforma remarkable is scale versus technology. The Maya lacked iron tools, draft animals, and wheeled transport systems for heavy labor. Despite this, they created hydraulic infrastructure sophisticated enough to sustain urban life in one of the wettest regions of Mesoamerica. Some archaeologists believe the city's survival depended entirely on this engineered landscape. If even part of the water control network failed, flooding and agricultural collapse may have followed rapidly. Ironically, the same system that allowed the city to flourish may also explain its eventual disappearance. Another major mystery concerns the movement of construction material. The region around Moral Reforma contains limited high-quality building stone, yet the city's pyramids and stairways required thousands of tons of limestone blocks. Without horses, oxen, or industrial tools, the Maya somehow transported heavy material across swampy terrain and dense rainforest. Researchers estimate some blocks weighed several tons. Moving them even short distances would have required immense coordination. One theory proposes seasonal river transport. During flood periods, stone may have been floated on large rafts through interconnected waterways before being dragged across prepared earthen ramps. Another hypothesis suggests raised causeways functioned as engineered transport corridors capable of supporting concentrated human labour teams. But none of these theories completely explain the precision of construction found at the site. Certain staircases and retaining walls exhibit alignment errors of only a few millimetres. Some joints remain remarkably tight despite centuries of rainfall and soil movement. Comparisons have been made with masonry precision at Palenque, and even with certain Andean stonework traditions thousands of kilometres away. The difference is that moral reformer achieved this level of stability in unstable wetland conditions, where gradual shifting should have destroyed alignment long ago. Like many Maya cities, moral reformer appears connected to astronomical observation. Several pyramids and plazas align closely with solar positions during equinoxes and solstices. Researchers studying the site noticed that certain ceremonial structures frame sunrise angles with unusual precision. During specific times of year, sunlight passes directly through architectural corridors and illuminates key stairways or plaza entrances. Some scholars argue these alignments were symbolic only. Others believe the city functioned partly as a giant observational instrument integrated into the Maya calendar system. The Maya already possessed one of the most accurate ancient calendars ever created, calculating solar cycles with astonishing precision centuries before European mechanical astronomy. The question is not whether the Maya understood astronomy. The real mystery is how they achieve such accuracy without optical instruments. Aligning massive structures to celestial movements requires long-term observation, mathematical consistency, and intergenerational transmission of data. At moral reformer, these alignments may also have served political purposes. Kings could associate themselves with predictable cosmic events, reinforcing divine authority through architecture itself. For centuries, the jungle erased nearly all memory of moral reformer. Then excavations uncovered carved stelae containing royal inscriptions and political records. Each discovery changed historians' understanding of the city. One monument revealed alliances with larger Maya powers. Another described military conflicts and dynastic struggles. Later inscriptions suggested the city controlled important river trade routes, linking inland kingdoms with Gulf Coast regions. This transformed moral reformer from a forgotten provincial settlement into a strategic political centre. Yet the inscriptions also deepen the mystery. If the city possessed advanced engineering, strategic trade access, and political influence, why was it abandoned so completely? Climate change remains one possibility. Paleoclimatic studies across the Maya world indicate severe drought cycles between the 8th and 10th centuries. But moral reformer existed in a wetland environment, making drought alone an incomplete explanation. Other researchers point toward political collapse, warfare, or failure of hydraulic infrastructure. If the water management system deteriorated, flooding could have rendered large sections of the city uninhabitable within decades. The jungle then finished what history began. Duma al-Jandal sits in the Al-Jawf region of northern Saudi Arabia, near one of the few major groundwater zones in the harsh Nafud desert system. Archaeologists had known the oasis for centuries through Assyrian inscriptions dating back to the 7th century BCE, where it appeared as Ad-Dummatu, a fortified desert stronghold controlling caravan routes between Mesopotamia and the Arabian Peninsula. But modern excavations accelerated only in the 20th century, when aerial surveys and satellite imagery revealed that the visible ruins represented only a fraction of a much larger buried settlement. Early excavations uncovered stone fortifications, ancient wells, religious structures, and layers of occupation stretching across more than 2,000 years. Each excavation season revealed something unexpected: underground water channels, imported ceramics from the Levant and Mesopotamia, Nabatean-style masonry, and architectural alignments that appeared too deliberate to be random. What began as a desert ruin slowly transformed into one of the most mysterious ancient engineering sites in Arabia. The first major mystery surrounding Dumat al-Jandal is simple. How did a large urban settlement survive for centuries in one of the driest environments in the Middle East? Average annual rainfall in the region is extremely low, often below 60 millimeters per year. Daytime temperatures can exceed 45 degrees Celsius, while nighttime temperatures may drop dramatically within hours. Such thermal stress normally destroys ancient stone structures over long periods, yet Dumat al-Jandal endured. Excavations revealed dozens of ancient wells carved deep into sandstone and limestone layers. Some remain functional even today. Hydrogeologists studying the oasis discovered that many wells were positioned with unusual precision along natural fracture systems connected to underground aquifers. This suggests that ancient builders possessed advanced empirical knowledge of desert hydrology long before formal geological science existed. Researchers comparing the oasis to settlements in Petra and Palmyra notice similarities in water management strategy but important differences in execution. Petra relied heavily on carved channels and cistern systems. Dumat al-Jandal instead appears to have depended on groundwater extraction, combined with controlled distribution through smaller concealed channels. Some archaeologists believe evaporation reduction techniques may have been used, though physical evidence remains incomplete because many structures collapsed centuries ago. The engineering puzzle becomes even stranger when population estimates are considered. Some studies suggest the oasis may have supported several thousand inhabitants at its peak, in addition to passing caravan networks. Maintaining enough water for agriculture, animals, and trade caravans would have required logistical coordination comparable to much larger ancient cities. Above the oasis rises Marid Castle, a fortress dominating the surrounding desert landscape. Local tradition claims the structure is impossible to conquer, and its design partially explains why. The fortress was constructed directly onto uneven rocky terrain using massive stone blocks fitted into the natural contours of the hill. Engineers studying the surviving walls observed that many sections remain stable despite centuries of erosion, earthquakes, thermal expansion, and desert winds carrying abrasive sand particles. One unresolved mystery is the apparent absence of extensive mortar use in certain sections. Similar to some Nabatean and even Incan construction techniques, many stones appear to rely primarily on geometric interlocking and weight distribution. Precision fitting reduced structural movement while allowing limited expansion under temperature changes. Modern structural simulations indicate that this flexibility may have helped the fortress survive environmental stress better than rigid masonry systems. Yet researchers still debate how ancient builders achieved such accurate stone placement on steep terrain without advanced lifting equipment. The mystery deepened after laser scanning surveys detected hidden interior chambers and blocked passageways beneath some walls. Several remain unexplored because excavation risks destabilizing parts of the structure. Some archaeologists suspect these hidden sections may contain older construction phases predating the visible fortress entirely. Among the most debated discoveries at Dumat al-Jandal are its ancient religious structures and their possible astronomical alignments. Archaeologists identified several pre-Islamic sacred areas oriented along unusually consistent directional axes. Measurements showed that some walls and entrances align closely with solar positions during seasonal transitions, particularly sunrise and sunset near solstices and equinoxes. The statistical probability of multiple structures sharing similar astronomical orientations purely by accident is relatively low. This has led researchers to propose that ancient inhabitants intentionally incorporated celestial observations into architectural planning. What makes the mystery more complex is the precision involved. In some cases, alignment errors are only a few degrees despite the absence of documented surveying instruments. Ancient Arabian societies are known to have relied heavily on astronomy for navigation across open desert terrain, but Dumat al-Jandal suggests something more systematic may have existed. Comparisons have been made to Nabatean solar alignments at Petra and even to certain Egyptian temple orientations, though on a smaller scale. However, unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, Northern Arabian civilizations left behind far fewer written technical records explaining how such measurements were achieved. One theory proposes that generations of observers tracked shadow movements over decades using simple marker stones. Another suggests that caravan trade exposed local engineers to astronomical knowledge from Mesopotamia, where Babylonian sky observation was already highly advanced by the first millennium BCE, yet no consensus exists. Some alignments appear intentional. Others may simply reflect practical environmental planning, such as optimizing shade and airflow. The problem is that both explanations may be true simultaneously, making it difficult to separate engineering necessity from symbolic cosmology. Recent archaeological surveys uncovered evidence suggesting that Dumat al-Jandal's builders may have manipulated airflow and thermal behavior inside parts of the city. Several storage structures contain unusually thick walls, combined with narrow ventilation openings positioned at calculated angles. Thermal modelling performed on surviving foundations suggests interior temperatures could have remained 8 to 12 degrees Celsius cooler than outside desert conditions. This resembles passive cooling strategies seen in Persian windcatcher systems centuries later. Though Dumat al-Jandal predates many of those technologies, researchers still do not fully understand how airflow circulated through the structures because upper architectural sections have largely disappeared. However, traces of internal channels imply that some buildings may have functioned as primitive climate control systems, using pressure differentials between shaded and exposed surfaces. If confirmed, this would represent one of the earliest sophisticated passive cooling adaptations discovered in northern Arabia. Dumat al-Jandal occupied a strategic position linking Mesopotamia, the Levant and Central Arabia. Excavations uncovered imported ceramics, glass fragments, incense residues, and metal goods, originating hundreds or even thousands of kilometers away. This raises another unresolved question. How did ancient trade caravans reliably navigate and survive such extreme desert distances? Modern logistics experts studying ancient caravan systems estimate that large camel caravans required enormous water coordination. A single camel can consume more than 100 liters of water after prolonged dehydration. Supporting large-scale trade routes would have required carefully planned oasis intervals and highly reliable water reserves. Some researchers believe Dumat al-Jandal may have possessed hidden underground storage systems not yet discovered. Ground-penetrating radar surveys continue revealing buried anomalies beneath the oasis, suggesting substantial unexplored infrastructure still exists below the modern archaeological zone. What do you think is still buried beneath the sands of Dumat al-Jandal? Lost technology, forgotten civilizations, or something even more mysterious? Share your thoughts in the comments below. In southwestern Libya, deep inside the Fezzan region of the Sahara Desert, lies Wadi Methendus, one of the largest concentrations of prehistoric rock art ever discovered in Africa. The valley first drew serious archaeological attention during Italian expeditions in the early 20th century, but large-scale documentation only accelerated in the 1950s and 60s when researchers realized the canyon walls contained thousands of engravings spread across dozens of kilometers. Every new survey revealed more carvings hidden beneath sand, collapsed rock faces, or desert varnish. What initially appeared to be scattered tribal artwork slowly emerged as something far more complex. An enormous visual archive created across thousands of years in one of the harshest environments on Earth. The first major shock came from the imagery itself. Modern Wadi Methendus is almost completely barren, receiving minimal rainfall and reaching summer surface temperatures above 60 degrees Celsius. Yet the rock walls depicted elephants, giraffes, crocodiles, hippos, and massive cattle herds, animals that require rivers, grasslands, and stable ecosystems to survive. Geological studies later confirmed that between roughly 10,000 and 5,000 years ago, the Sahara was dramatically different. Satellite sediment analysis and paleoclimate cores revealed ancient lakes, seasonal rivers, and monsoon systems stretching across regions now considered hyper-arid desert. Wadi Methendus suddenly became more than an archaeological site. It became direct evidence that an entire ecosystem larger than modern Europe had once existed and then collapsed. As researchers mapped the valley in greater detail, another mystery emerged. The density of engravings at Wadi Methendus was extraordinarily high compared to many other Saharan rock art sites. Thousands of figures were concentrated along specific canyon corridors and elevated observation points rather than distributed randomly. Some panels contained dozens of overlapping generations of carvings, suggesting the location remained important for millennia. What puzzled archaeologists most was the technical consistency. Many engravings were carved deeply into sandstone using remarkably uniform incision methods. Certain grooves maintained nearly identical depth and cutting angles, despite being created centuries apart. Experimental archaeology attempted to reproduce these marks using stone tools available during the Neolithic period, but some results suggested the craters possessed a far more refined understanding of percussion carving and abrasive finishing than previously assumed. Microscopic analysis of the grooves revealed repeated polishing patterns, implying the artists may have used multi-stage carving techniques rather than simple hammering. In some sections, the surface was intentionally smoothed before engraving began. Similar preparation methods are seen in advanced petroglyph traditions thousands of kilometers away, including parts of the Arabian Peninsula and southern Algeria. The question became increasingly difficult to ignore. How did mobile desert populations develop such durable and technically consistent carving systems over such immense timescales? The discoveries became even stranger when researchers noticed recurring symbols and animal arrangements appearing across separate sections of the valley. Certain horn shapes, hunting formations, and geometric marks repeated with unusual precision. Some archaeologists proposed that Wadi Methendus functioned as more than ceremonial art. It may have served as a long-term information system preserving environmental memory, migration routes, or territorial markers. The idea sounds speculative until the geographic layout is examined. Many carvings appear near ancient water channels identified through satellite radar imaging. Others are positioned at natural choke points where prehistoric travelers would have entered or exited the valley system. Several panels overlook elevated terrain with wide visibility across the surrounding basin. This has led to comparisons with proto-cartographic systems, primitive landscape mapping methods that may have helped groups navigate a changing Sahara. One recurring motif depicts cattle with exaggerated horn proportions and carefully repeated body geometry. Some specialists believe these images represented ownership systems or seasonal migration data rather than symbolic art. Similar theories have been proposed for the petroglyphs of Tassili N'Ajjer in Algeria, though Wadi Methendus appears older in several sectors. If true, the valley may represent one of humanity's earliest attempts to encode practical environmental knowledge into permanent visual structures. One of the greatest unsolved mysteries surrounding Wadi Methendus is not how the engravings were made, but how they survived. Desert environments are extremely destructive. Sand abrasion, thermal expansion, and chemical weathering gradually erase exposed rock surfaces. Yet many engravings remain astonishingly sharp after thousands of years. Geologists studying the site discovered that the sandstone surfaces are coated in a dark mineral layer known as desert varnish, composed largely of manganese and iron oxides. This natural coating forms extremely slowly, often requiring centuries to develop. Some engravings appear to have been carved with an awareness of how this varnish behaved over time. In certain areas, artists removed only the upper mineral layer, creating high-contrast imagery that remained visible for millennia as the surrounding surface darkened further. This suggests a surprisingly sophisticated understanding of stone weathering processes. Modern conservation scientists have noted that some carvings were positioned on rock faces, angled to reduce direct wind erosion. Others were placed beneath slight overhangs, protecting them from seasonal runoff. These choices imply the creators may have intentionally designed the engravings for maximum longevity. Comparisons have been made to ancient Egyptian quarry inscriptions and even Nabatean stone-cutting techniques seen later at Petra. But Wadi Methendus predates many of those civilizations by thousands of years. The technical gap remains difficult to explain fully. Perhaps the largest mystery connected to Wadi Methendus is the disappearance of the world that created it. Paleoclimatic evidence suggests the African humid period ended faster than many older climate models predicted. Lakebed cores from Chad, Libya and Sudan indicate major environmental collapse phases may have occurred within only a few centuries. For prehistoric populations dependent on grasslands and water systems, such a shift would have been catastrophic. Entire migration networks would have failed, hunting territories would have vanished. Water sources mapped across generations could have disappeared within a single lifetime. Some researchers believe the increasing complexity of the engravings reflects this environmental crisis. Earlier carvings focus heavily on wildlife abundance, while later phases show more domesticated cattle and human movement scenes. It may represent humanity adapting in real time to one of the largest climate transformations in prehistoric history. This has turned Wadi Methendus into an important scientific archive not just for archaeology, but for climate science itself. The valley preserves visual evidence of ecological collapse carved directly into stone by people who experienced it firsthand. Every major expedition to Wadi Methendus revealed something unexpected. Early Italian surveys documented only large animal engravings, leading scholars to interpret the site as ceremonial hunting art. Later, French and Libyan teams uncovered layered carving sequences proving the valley remained active across multiple cultural periods. Satellite imaging in recent decades identified buried paleo rivers surrounding the site, confirming that the desert was once a fertile corridor. Microscopic groove analysis later suggested specialized carving methods are far more advanced than initially assumed. Climate studies then linked the imagery directly to the collapse of the Green Sahara, transforming the valley into evidence of ancient environmental disaster. With every discovery, the mystery only deepened. What do you think Wadi Methendus truly was? A sacred site, an ancient navigation system, or the remains of a lost prehistoric network across the Sahara? Share your theories and thoughts in the comments below. In the eastern outskirts of Lima, Peru, where modern neighborhoods press against the dry hills of the Rimac Valley, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a forgotten adobe city known as Hayand de Pariachi. At first glance, the site looked unimpressive compared to the stone fortresses of the Inca. No massive granite walls, no towering pyramids, only endless layers of eroded earth-colored structures half buried beneath dust and urban expansion. But every excavation season revealed something increasingly difficult to explain. Beneath the surface was evidence of a highly organized pre-Inca administrative center that may have mastered earthquake-resistant construction, precision urban planning, hydraulic engineering, and social control systems centuries before the Spanish ever arrived in South America. The first documented archaeological investigations around Hayand de Pariachi intensified during the 20th century, As Lima rapidly expanded toward the eastern valleys, researchers initially believed the site belonged to a relatively ordinary regional settlement of the Yixma culture, a civilization that flourished along Peru's central coast between roughly 900 and 1470 AD, before being absorbed into the Inca Empire. Early excavations exposed large plazas, corridors, storage compounds, ramps, and ceremonial compounds constructed almost entirely from adobe bricks. But the scale immediately raised questions. The site occupied a strategic position between the Andes highlands and the Pacific coast, directly connected to ancient trade corridors crossing one of the driest environments on Earth. Each new excavation revealed another layer of complexity. Archaeologists discovered extensive administrative compounds with controlled access points, narrow corridors designed to regulate movement, and massive open courtyards capable of holding large gatherings. Unlike many ceremonial centers in ancient Peru, Hayand de Pariachi appeared engineered not only for ritual activity, but also for administration, taxation, storage, and regional coordination. Some researchers compared its logistical organization to simplified forms of later Inca administrative hubs known as tampas. Yet Hayand existed before the Inca expansion fully transformed the region. One of the greatest mysteries surrounding the site is how its adobe architecture survived for centuries in one of the world's most seismically unstable regions. Peru sits directly on the Pacific Ring of Fire, where tectonic pressure from the Nazca Plate generates frequent earthquakes. Adobe construction is normally extremely vulnerable to seismic activity because dried mud bricks crack and collapse under lateral vibration. Yet many walls at Hayand de Pariachi remained standing long after abandonment. Detailed structural analysis revealed unusual engineering decisions. Some walls were extraordinarily thick at the base, but narrowed gradually upward, redistributing stress during seismic shaking. In several sectors, archaeologists identified alternating densities within adobe layers, suggesting builders intentionally varied material composition to absorb vibration. Certain internal walls also contained void-like spaces that may have functioned as primitive shock absorbers. Modern earthquake engineers studying traditional Andean construction techniques have noted similarities between these ancient methods and modern seismic damping principles used in earthquake-resistant buildings today. The mystery deepens when comparing Hayand to other ancient adobe cities. The massive Chimu capital of Chan Chan, located farther north on Peru's coast, also relied heavily on adobe, but many of its structures suffered catastrophic erosion over time. At Hayand, however, portions of the site retained surprising stability, despite centuries of earthquakes, seasonal humidity fluctuations, and urban encroachment. Some archaeologists suspect the builders developed specialized plaster coatings or mineral additives that slowed erosion, but the exact composition remains uncertain. Laboratory analysis has detected varying concentrations of clay, sand, shell fragments, and organic fibers within construction layers, yet no definitive formula explains the durability completely. Excavations also uncovered evidence of sophisticated water management systems hidden beneath the city's surface. This was particularly puzzling because Hayand de Pariachi sits within a hyper-arid coastal desert where annual rainfall is extremely low. Maintaining a large population in such conditions required precise control of water distribution. Researchers discovered channels, underground conduits, and carefully angled drainage systems integrated into the architecture itself. Some canal gradients were so slight that maintaining water flow would have required remarkable surveying precision. Hydraulic specialists studying the site noted that several channels appeared optimized to reduce evaporation while stabilizing sediment flow. In some sectors, Layered gravel and sand beneath floors may have acted as filtration systems or moisture regulators. These discoveries fueled speculation that the inhabitants possessed a far deeper practical understanding of hydrology than previously assumed for pre-Inca coastal societies. Comparisons were drawn to ancient Persian qanat systems and Roman water engineering, though Huaycan's solutions evolved independently within a radically different environment. Another major discovery emerged from the site's unusual spatial organization. Archaeologists noticed that movement through the complex was highly controlled. Many corridors abruptly narrowed before opening into plazas. Access routes repeatedly forced sharp turns, limiting visibility and slowing large groups. Certain elevated platforms overlooked central spaces with clear lines of sight over crowds below. Researchers began proposing that Huaycan functioned as a carefully engineered environment designed to reinforce hierarchy and social control. This theory gained strength when excavations uncovered evidence of restricted ceremonial sectors separated from public zones. The architecture itself appeared to dictate human behavior. In some compounds, entrances aligned in ways that directed sunlight dramatically across ritual areas during particular seasons. While not as astronomically explicit as sites like Chanquillo, the precision of alignment suggested intentional planning. Urban archaeologists compared the psychological effects of these spaces to controlled ceremonial pathways later perfected by the Inca at sites such as Huánuco Pampa. The scale of storage facilities discovered at Huaycan introduced another mystery. Excavators identified compounds that may have stored food, textiles, tribute goods, and trade commodities moving between the Andes and the coast. Yet the civilization operating this center lacked wheeled transport. Draft animals capable of carrying heavy loads over long distances, and metal tools comparable to Old World civilizations. Despite these limitations, the site appears to have supported highly organized regional logistics. Some historians now believe Hayand de Pariachi operated as a major redistribution hub, linking agricultural communities of the Rimac Valley with long-distance trade networks extending into the Andes. This would have required sophisticated administrative coordination long before the rise of the centralized Inca bureaucracy. The city's strategic location may explain why the Inca later absorbed and reused portions of the region rather than destroying them outright. Every excavation season added new questions rather than definitive answers. In some areas, archaeologists discovered traces of repainting and architectural modification spanning multiple generations, suggesting continuous adaptation of the site over centuries. Elsewhere, buried structures indicated that older ceremonial sectors were intentionally sealed beneath newer construction phases, hinting at changing political or religious systems. Several sectors remain unexcavated today, buried beneath both desert sediment and the expanding urban sprawl of modern Lima. What do you think the builders of Hayand de Pariachi truly understood about earthquakes, water, and engineering that may have been lost to history? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The ancient Toltec city of Tula, about 70 kilometers northwest of modern Mexico City, is home to the Atlantean columns standing atop Pyramid B like silent mechanical guardians from another age. Each figure rises nearly 4.6 meters tall, weighs several tons, and was carved from hard volcanic basalt nearly 1,000 years ago. What makes them extraordinary is not only their size, but the engineering questions they continue to raise. Archaeologists still debate how the Toltecs, between the 10th and 12th centuries, transported, assembled, and balanced these massive stone warriors on the summit of a pyramid without metal cranes, wheeled transport systems, or large draft animals. Even today, many of the technical methods behind their construction remain uncertain. The first modern rediscovery of Tula began during the 19th century when explorers traveling through central Mexico reported enormous buried stone fragments scattered across the site. Early excavations uncovered sections of giant carved limbs and torsos, but no one initially understood they belonged to complete standing figures. In the 1940s, Mexican archaeologist Jorge Ruffier Acosta conducted more systematic excavations around Pyramid B. As layers of debris were removed, researchers realized the fragments formed 4 colossal warrior statues placed on the pyramid's summit. This discovery immediately changed the understanding of Toltec architecture. Instead of decorative sculpture alone, the figures appear to function as structural columns supporting the roof of a temple complex above them. Further excavations revealed something even more surprising. The Atlantean columns were not carved from single monolithic blocks. Each warrior was assembled from multiple precisely shaped basalt sections stacked vertically with remarkable alignment accuracy. The head, torso, legs, and lower base were engineered to interlock, while distributing enormous vertical weight. Modern structural analysis suggests that even slight misalignment in the load distribution could have caused cracking at the neck or waist over centuries of stress. Yet the statues survived earthquakes, erosion, and nearly a millennium of exposure. Some engineers comparing ancient stone structures note that this level of vertical balance resembles certain load-bearing calculations seen in much later Roman and medieval stone architecture. The basalt itself deepens the mystery. Basalt ranks around 6 on the Mohs hardness scale, making it extremely difficult to carve using primitive stone tools. Experimental archaeology shows that shaping volcanic basalt with simple hammerstones can require hundreds of labor hours even for relatively small surfaces. Yet the Atlantean columns contain highly detailed carvings of butterfly-shaped chest plates, feather ornaments, ceremonial knives, and atlatl dart throwers. The symmetry of these engravings suggests planned measurement systems rather than improvised carving. Some researchers believe the Toltecs may have used abrasive cutting techniques involving quartz sand and water, functioning almost like a primitive industrial grinding process. Similar theories have been proposed for hard stone cutting in ancient Egypt and at Ollantaytambo, where precise stonework also appears beyond what traditional tools alone would easily explain. One of the greatest unanswered questions involves transportation. Geological studies indicate the basalt likely originated several kilometers from the pyramid complex. Transporting blocks weighing multiple tons across uneven terrain and then lifting them more than 10 meters above ground level would have required a massive coordinated labor system. Unlike Eurasian civilizations, the Toltecs lacked oxen, horses, or functional transport wheels for heavy hauling. Some archaeologists suggest giant earthen ramps combined with wooden rollers and agave fiber ropes. However, no complete transport infrastructure has ever been found at Tula. This mirrors similar unresolved engineering puzzles at Baalbek, where stones exceeding 800 tons were somehow moved into position nearly 2,000 years ago. Another discovery at the site revealed that the Atlantean columns were aligned with a carefully planned ceremonial axis across the city. Their positioning on Pyramid B faces specific directions associated with solar movement and ritual processions. Some archaeoastronomers argue that the orientation may connect to the cycle of Venus, a celestial body deeply associated with warfare and divine rulership in Mesoamerican cultures. Venus held enormous symbolic importance among the Maya and Toltecs because its appearance patterns could be predicted with surprising accuracy. Codices from later civilizations recorded Venus cycles with errors of only a few hours across many years. The possibility that the Atlantean columns were integrated into astronomical observation systems suggests the structure may have served both ceremonial and scientific purposes simultaneously. As excavation continued through the 20th century, researchers uncovered evidence that the statues once supported a large roofed temple complex. Stone sockets and beam placements indicate the figures acted as actual architectural columns carrying substantial overhead loads. This discovery shocked many historians because humanoid load-bearing sculptures on this scale are extremely rare in pre-Columbian America. The closest comparisons often come from caryatid columns in ancient Greek architecture, yet the Toltec examples developed independently on another continent centuries later. Some structural historians believe the Atlantean columns represent one of the most advanced integrations of symbolic art and engineering in the ancient Americas. The warrior imagery itself also raises questions about Toltec military technology. The figures carry atlatls, specialized spear-throwing devices capable of dramatically increasing projectile velocity. Experimental reconstructions show that atlatl darts can exceed 150 km per hour and penetrate armor or animal hide with devastating force. This suggests the Toltecs possessed advanced practical knowledge of leverage, kinetic force, and aerodynamic efficiency long before formal physics existed. Some scholars argue that the exaggerated depiction of military equipment on the statues may symbolize elite warrior orders controlling both political and religious authority inside Tula. Chemical analysis of surviving pigment traces has revealed that the statues were once brightly painted in red, blue, black and white mineral-based colors. This means the grey stone appearance seen today is only a weathered remnant of their original form. Reconstructed models suggest the temple summit would have appeared visually overwhelming under sunlight, with towering painted warriors visible from large distances across the city. The psychological effect may have been intentional, functioning as a display of state power similar to colossal imperial monuments in ancient Egypt or Assyria. Despite decades of study, major mysteries remain unresolved. No surviving Toltec texts explain the construction process. No tools capable of producing the finest basalt detailing have been definitively identified. Archaeologists still debate whether the statues were carved directly near the pyramid or transported as partially finished components. The exact methods used to stabilize the figures against seismic movement are also uncertain. Modern laser scans reveal surprisingly precise proportional consistency among the statues, implying standardized measurement systems that are still poorly understood. What do you think the Toltecs truly knew about engineering and stone construction nearly 1,000 years ago? Could the Atlantean columns represent lost building techniques that modern researchers still do not fully understand? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below.